Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this evening's City Council meeting. I do know that the agenda this evening indicated that the meeting would be televised. However, we were informed earlier today by Rogers that unfortunately their personnel wasn't available, and so tonight's meeting isn't televised. However, the good news is that it will be telecast via our web streaming and can be found on our website permanently afterwards, as is the case for all City Council and committee meetings. So with that, if I can ask everyone to stand up for the singing of O Canada as you're able, and just a reminder that we are the choir this evening. Thank you very much, everybody. It's been moved by Councillor Singh that the minutes of the regular meeting held June 29th and the special meetings held June 29th and August 10th as mailed to the Mayor and Councillors be accepted. All in favour? Opposed? That's carried. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, we'll move on to item number 4, communications referred to file. And consistent with our flag policy, note the flag request that was approved for Arthritis Awareness Month, September 14th to the 21st. There are no presentations this evening, so we'll move on to item number 6. And we'll start with 6A, and that's notice has been given for any member of the public to speak for or against the bylaw to close and retain parts of Agnes Street, listed as items 11G and 14G in today's agenda. Is anybody here to speak about Agnes Street?
Indirectly.
Sorry?
Indirectly, yes. I was going to bring that up among my comments for myself.
Okay, well, sir, if you want to come forward and speak to Agnes Street, this is your opportunity to deal with that item. I'll remind delegations that you have 5 minutes to make your presentation.
Do I lose my 5 minutes that I came for originally?
Which item, sir?
Respect for taxpayers.
If you're speaking specifically to this item, only on this, you'll still get your other time.
Okay, that's good. Well, I'm glad I came tonight then, really. My name is Andy Hook. I live in the area where you're talking about. I've lived there. I've grown up there. When I was a young man, I lived on Gruen Street, which runs right into Agnes. Now I live on Walter Street, which is only 2 streets away. I walk every morning through Kitchener. I usually go at 6:30 and I'm back usually about 9 o'clock. And today I just walked down by Agnes. And I saw in the paper last week that there was a letter stating that you would like to close Agnes Street. But when I walked by today, I've noticed that the trees were cut already. The pavement was cut already. There was a new curb in already. Looks like the existing sidewalk is going to be extended and taken out and the parking lot made bigger. I thought that property originally belonged to the city. Am I incorrect in assuming that?
We can get the questions answered, so if you can make your presentation, sir, and we'll get any
Okay.
questions answered at the end.
Well, I would be against making it a private. Apparently, the insurance company has a lot right now and is using it for their people. But I would be against any changes to the actual island itself, because I can remember when I was a young man that grassed area was a grassed area and there was no parking on it whatsoever. And then when the Granite Club got it, the Granite Club changed it so that there was only one direction that you could go with traffic. When I was younger, there was two directions you could go. You could actually go back onto Park Street and make it very easy to make a turn. Now you have to make the offset to go down towards the traffic light. So I would keep it just the way it is, with no altercation as far as changing the boundaries of it, making it bigger, making it smaller, or anything else like that. Thank you.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Are there any questions for Mr. Hook? If not, if you can take your seat then. Thank you. Can staff just answer any questions about where we're at on the closure and why some work has been done? Mr. Wilmer, can you help perhaps?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The item that's on the agenda tonight is really about the legal status of the piece of land and whether it's closed as a public road or whether it remains open as a public road. What the delegation referred to as changes to the land is completely aside from that, and even if the land remains open as a public road, should we choose to alter it or allow others to make alterations to it, that can happen regardless of the closure status.
Okay, thank you. Any questions of staff? We'll just deal with that item then. Somebody want to move items 11G and 14G in the bylaws? Moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by Councillor Schneider. Any discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll now then move to our next item on the agenda, which is two delegations registered to speak with respect to changes to our community flag raisings and flag protocol. And the first delegation is Lorraine Grenier.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Chairman, and Council. I'm an Aboriginal woman, a Métis Woodland Tribe Wolf Clan from Saskatchewan. I wish to introduce my sister, Rosie Christian Weiler, Program Director at Healing of the Seven Generations. Rosie is Oneida Bear Clan, a wife and a mother of two, and a sister to all. She has been working within the Kitchener Aboriginal community for the past 5 years. She started at the Native Housing and now with the Healing of the Seven Generations as program coordinator. The Healing of the Seven Generations works with all Aboriginal people and community members in the area. They are here to assist those individuals who are suffering from any effects of the legacy of the residential schools, including intergenerational impacts, such as growing up in dysfunctional families, emotional, physical abuse, poor self-esteem, loss of culture, lack of awareness of culture identity, teaching, values, traditions, and poor self-image, and also addictions counseling. Rosie is a familiar face to the community as a program coordinator in the Healing of the Seven Generations, and I'm happy that Rosie could join us, and please join me in welcoming her. Quote, this is Rosie's quote, "I love my job, and I hope to do more to the community here in the Waterloo region. Thank you."
Okay. Thank you. Welcome, Rosie.
Well, thank you for having me. So I guess that's going to come up, but I'm going to talk at the same time, I guess. So
Sure.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. So we're here today about the Aboriginal flag. So first, let me start with the official government stand on Aboriginal rights. So basically, Aboriginal rights refer to the practices, traditions, and customs, making us unique culture. All Aboriginal rights are protected under Section 35 of the Constitution Act from 1982. So I don't know how I switch it. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that's basically it. The government of Canada has considered National Aboriginal Day to be part of the celebrate celebration of Canada and their program, which includes St. John Baptiste Day, the Canadian Multiculturalism Day, as well as Canada Day, with the Aboriginal Day kicking off for June 21st. And this is part of the federal government's initiative. So they're hoping that we would recognize National Aboriginal Day. So it was introduced in 1996. And then from there, you can't really read that, but it's basically saying that you can celebrate it in any way, but as long as you're recognizing the Aboriginal people in your community, that would be really actually wonderful, as proclaimed by the Queen through the Lieutenant Governor. So, well, popular history in Kitchener. Kitchener dates back to 1874 when the land was given to Six Nations by the British, and we were supposed to be using it for our enjoyment forever. So, as you know, there's dispute over the land. Still part of the Haldimand land tract, which is, I'm sure won't be settled in my lifetime. But seeing that our government is willing to acknowledge us, we're hoping that we'd have the Aboriginal flags up. So the Six Nations flag is represented by the Hiawatha, which is really a wampum belt. So the Hiawatha would cover the Haldimand-Norfolk tract, but there's a lot of Ojibwe people in this area, so I would hope that we could maybe do the Thunderbird. And then the Nunavut flag is there because that was also in 1996 that the government decided that Nunavut should be a separate part because they have the largest number of Inuit people, so I included Nunavut. And then the Métis flag, which the Métis Council of Canada considers the blue Métis Infinity to be their flag. So we would like to be able to put those 4 up for Aboriginal Day, and then possibly, I don't know, I might be overstretching here, but maybe the week leading up to the 21st, just to show the support that
International.
that we Solidarity Day for all of Canadians and Canada. I mean, we have to remember, like you said, for instance, my great-grandfather who fought in the First World War, who did an excellent job from the age of 15 to 21, and he was in a foxhole the whole time, but at no point was he ever allowed to vote, and just before he died, he was allowed to vote in 1966, yet he fought in a war in a country that not only didn't sign up, somebody came to the reserve and picked him up because he was a big boy and he could fight well for them. So my other grandfather, he fought in the Second World War, and he also was not a citizen, but still fought for Canada and the rights that Canada has for freedom. So I was hoping that we can look at all of the wonderful things that Aboriginal people have contributed to this land, even when we weren't considered citizens. And now that we are citizens and we have a special day, that maybe Kitchener could take that one law that they have and consider us as well, so that we can possibly put our flags up in front instead of the back of City Hall.
War flag on November.
And possibly the war flag on November. Sorry.
Okay.
Thank you. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you very much to both of you. Are there any questions? Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Thanks for coming in and explaining some of the flags and the meanings around Aboriginal Day and the history. You are aware that there are 2 locations that the flags can be flown, right? Speaker's Corner, as well as the Duke and Yonge Street flagpoles. So there are 2 opportunities for the flags to be flown. I'm kind of puzzled as to your concern with those locations.
My problem is that I would like to be recognized as one of the communities that are important in this country and in this community. So I would like to have our flags flown in front so that everyone can see them and everyone will know that you do have a large Aboriginal population in this area, and we are proud, and hopefully that Kitchener is also proud of us.
Okay.
Aboriginal Day, our flag was behind the building. Nobody could see it. And it was stuck on Speaker's Corners in the back near the alley. Like, what is that? That's where you put your advertising flags and things like that. Aboriginals are a people. They're people. They're not a group that started up some sort of I don't know, some sort of a parade or whatever. We are the First Nations, and we're on First Nations land. We're standing on it. On Canada Day, we went 2 days after Canada Day, we went to retrieve our 2 flags, the one in the back and the one down at Speaker's Corners near the alley, and they were gone. They had been removed on Canada Day by somebody from City Hall. We didn't even get our extra 3 days that was agreed upon in our document we signed for the 18th to the 25th and then the 25th to the 31st. Our flags were removed by somebody in the City Hall. And also, just to make a point, the Nunavut flag is a Canada provincial flag. It is not considered a native flag. It is a territorial flag, just as Ontario has a flag. Saskatchewan, that Nunavut flag should never have been touched. It represents a part of the territories of Canada, and it was removed also. So why were our flags removed when Canada Day came about? Are we not considered part of this country?
Thank you. Just maybe, is there any other questions? If not, just for everyone's clarification. And Ms. Weiler, it was you who had approached the city about the flying of the flags. Is that correct?
Yes.
And staff were then in correspondence with you that you hadn't made that approach in the time frame, but we would work with you to get the flags flying in time. And as I understand it, because at the time I remember discussing this with staff, whereas the practice is normally to only allow one flag for up to 1 week, the concession that was made because of the different groups was to fly one flag each for 1 week on each of the flag poles. And my understanding was you were comfortable with that at the time, correct?
Yeah, well, we did. I thought it was
Till the 31st.
a nice gesture because we had gotten it in really late. So that's why I'm coming way ahead of time, so that I'm hoping next year that we can get that switched.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. How does council want to deal with this issue? So we do have our current flag policy in place. If we want to consider anything else, we would have to give that direction to staff. Councillor Gazzola?
I'm confused. Where are we going that's contrary to our current policy?
So the delegation is requesting, as you know, our policy is that on the 3 flagpoles in the front, the only flags that fly there are the Canadian provincial and Kitchener flag, unless we have a visit from a current head of state or our Governor General or Lieutenant Governor. And any other flags fly on one of 2 community flagpoles that are available. So does council want to take any action on the current one, or?
I'll move that no action be taken.
Okay, move no action. Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Davey. All those in any discussion? Councillor Marsh?
Well, I just want to say that I can appreciate the delegates' concerns, but the flags were up until the 31st, as far as I remember it, and also I also am very happy to see that staff was able to, go along with what they asked for late, and I'm happy to see that we have an early request now. But we cannot be flying the provincial or territorial flags from other regions because otherwise we would be looking at flying the Saskatchewan flag or the BC flag at different times, and really we want to just provide equal access to all groups that want to fly their flag. So I think it's only fair.
Councillor Fernandez?
There were 4 flags that were identified in the presentation. So am I to understand that each of those flags could be flown on 2 flag posts for a week, removed, and the other 2 flags be flown for the next 2 weeks, which would give them the coverage of 2 full weeks of flag Is that?
That's what we did this year.
That's what we did this
Mr.
year.
Wilmer, you want to jump in?
Yes, essentially the flag policy limits a community flag to one flag on one pole for 1 week. This year, staff were able to be accommodating and allow 4 flags on 2 poles for a total of 12 days, ending June 30th. I see no reason why we couldn't do that again next year, but they would still be the community flag poles.
Okay, and I would support that. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I normally don't take questions from the audience, but just to Ms. Grenier, please. That information was communicated to Ms. Weiler that for Canada Day, the Canadian flag would be put back up. We can work with you in terms of the dates when the individual flags get put up, and I guess what I would suggest is that you formally fill in the request, submit it, and then staff can work with you if we have that advance notice to work on the timing. So with that, Councillor Gazzola, you weren't looking to say something, or you were? Sorry. Yeah.
My motion means that we leave the flag policy as it is, and,
Right.
and of course we try to work with everyone to accommodate them.
Okay. Thank you very much. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. Oh, it wasn't? Sorry. Okay. That's carried. We will... Mr. Chapman.
On the next item.
Oh, sorry. The next item? Okay. We'll now move on then to item 6C. And Mr. Chapman. And then we have one delegation for it.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovic. I'll draw your attention to the staff report found on page 8A. Page 1 of that report provides background on the issue. I won't rehash it, but it also includes in italics the council motion which was deferred to this date and was the basis for the staff report. On pages 2 and 3, you can see that we've summarized the results of our discussions with the regiment, with the City of Waterloo and the City of Cambridge. That's what you asked us to do. And we've summarized 5 options on the 3rd page of the report. The first would be to proceed with the motion as it was deferred, which would see the city submit an application for a monument in Kitchener. The second option would be to partner with Cambridge on their monument. The third, to partner with Waterloo on their monument. The fourth option is to partner with both Cambridge and Waterloo. And the last option would be to take no action at this time. The other issue I'll draw your attention is under financial implications. The deferred motion deals with the issue of the installation cost, but does not deal with the issue of ongoing maintenance. And so you should set your mind to that question as well, and either make no commitment to perpetual maintenance, make an upfront allocation of funds to provide assistance, or to accept, as has been requested of the city, an ongoing commitment to perpetual maintenance for the monument. As you've noted, Lieutenant Colonel Rainville is here today to provide a delegation on the issue.
Okay. There's a question of staff. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's a question of staff. Perhaps I should listen to the delegation first.
Okay.
I did have one minor question, and it's staff are now recommending that it be placed on the Armory property as opposed to city property. Is that part of what staff is recommending?
Mr. Chapman?
My understanding is that that was always Council's motion. So from the very first point that Council entertained the proposal, Council expressed a preference to see it cited on the Armory lands.
Okay. I have some other points, but I'll make it after. And I would like to move the recommendation when it comes time.
Okay, I'll come back to you when the time comes. Colonel Rainville. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, thanks for this opportunity to speak to you again. I won't go over the presentation that we did, other than to emphasize that this particular monument that we're talking about, the Lave, is a commemoration, not a celebration, but a commemoration of the service of young Canadians, male and female, all services, in their support for Canada's mission in Afghanistan. And that was to support the move to help Afghanistan develop a democratic and lawful society where everybody was free to have education, freedom of movement, and freedom of choice. This is not to glorify war, and if that's a concern, I just want to emphasize, this is not to glorify war. This is not a tank. This is an armored personnel carrier, which was designed by a Canadian company, General Dynamics Land Services in London, to support and protect Canadian soldiers when they were moving through a combat zone. So it had protective weaponry and armor plating to protect the soldiers so when they moved across a dangerous area, they were protected. And I think that the fact that we didn't have large fatalities like some of our allies did speaks well of this particular piece of equipment as protecting our soldiers. And the reason why many of our soldiers are here today to be with their loved ones. In speaking to the young veterans, I call them young veterans because to them I'm an old white-haired guy, but and you have young veterans here that are in their 20s and early 30s. And in speaking to them, they are totally in support of this particular monument because it recognizes their service to Canada and Canadian values that I've mentioned before. They see the cenotaph that we have downtown and in other cities that recognize the service of their predecessors in World War I, World War II, and Korea. And this recognizes their service in the 10 years that Canadians served in Afghanistan. And they're totally behind that. Just talking to my colleague Paul Stables here, he reminded me that in May 9th, 2014, and I know you were there, Mr. Mayor, we had a National Day of Remembrance. The government had that in Ottawa, and we recognized that there would be no way that our veterans from this particular area could get to it. And so we were able to have that out in Waterloo International Airport, and over 200 veterans were there, and there was a lab there, and they talked about their memories and how this particular piece of kit supported them to continue their mission. So I'm asking you, having seen the report that Mr. Chapman has and we've consulted on, I'm asking you to support our request for a letter of application for the Lab 3 monument, permission to site the monument in front of the Kitchener Armory as was designated by Council, and funding up to $10,000 in the 2016 budget for the installation of the monument, and provide perpetual maintenance. Now that was a sticking point, I think, some of the people were worrying about what's going on there. From previous history and consulting with Canadian Forces Base Borden and the 1st Hussars, who maintains a Sherman tank from the Second World War in Victoria Park in London, they've not had a major repair there. They've been able to do that on their own. So my time is up.
We still have 1 minute.
Okay. So I'm not seeing a need for a huge sum of money, and as I've recommended in talking to Mr. Chapman, if we could set money aside for the maintenance, that money would be available as needed. I don't see where there would be a need for a major refit or paint job every 10 years on this particular monument in order to maintain it. So thank you for the extra time.
No problem.
Any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Thank you. And just for clarity for all the delegations, the bell from the clerk is actually a 1 minute warning, so it's actually at the 4 minute mark. So there's several people with questions for you, Colonel Rainville. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Mr. Rainville, for coming in and for such a worthy cause. I just wanted a bit of a clarification because I could have sworn on the report that you guys, your organization wasn't in support of having in front of the armory.
The original criteria for setting up these monuments by Canada Company, which is the overall group that has taken this under their wing, is to place it in the community as a community monument. And that's why we've recommended that it be placed on some community property other than the armory. For me, from a sympathetic point, being in front of the armory is great, if that's what the council would say and would support. that'd be fine. But the recommendation the Canada Council, the Canada Company would be is to put it on some community property. Waterloo is talking about putting it on, getting one and putting it on Veterans Green, which is community property other than D&D property.
Okay. Thank you for that. And Mr. Mayor, I'm prepared to second Councillor Gazzola's motion.
Okay, I'll come back to you as well. Councillor Yanetsky.
Yes, thank you for coming in your presentation. Staff have outlined 5 options in their report and for council to make a decision on. And I know you've touched base with Waterloo and I assume Cambridge and Kitchener. Are we looking at individual vehicles at those particular municipalities, or are you looking for one jointly done with Kitchener Waterloo or Kitchener Cambridge, or like what would you recommend? What are you looking for?
Basically what's happened is I went to Cambridge first and recommended a monument for Cambridge to represent the southern part of the region. And then I've come to Kitchener to have one in place here to represent the northern part of the region. Waterloo independently has gone forward after having talked to one of our council members, and from my understanding, were enthused about the idea and have applied separately for their own. So what am I recommending? My recommendation is that we have 2 separate monuments, one in Kitchener, one in Cambridge at this point. What Waterloo does, we will support in any way we can, but that's my recommendation.
Okay. And in terms of maintenance, that would fall on the responsibility of the city. What maintenance would be required from your perspective?
From what the experience that the First Hussars have had, that's a reserve armoured regiment in London, and in maintaining the Sherman tank, theirs was touch-up paint, dealing with graffiti because they're in a large public area, or if there's been any rust to cover that and maintain it. But they've never had it taken down and sent it in for a major paint job. The Canadian Armed Forces has an armour museum in Borden, and they have a refurbishment schedule that they do, and the last time I'd heard that they did a tank was after 10 years, and they did a repair on that. They did a major paint job. But I don't see that happening, nor a requirement for that.
So you'd rather have this located outdoors than instead of indoors where you...
Oh, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
I had suggested if we could put it in front of the auditorium. The auditorium is there to commemorate the veterans from our past. And I thought that that would fit together. And part of the thing as far as the monument is concerned is an educational thing. That's the other point, one of the criteria that they're trying to get across, is that it's an education for the citizens so that they're aware of what Canada has done in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the auditorium was built as a memorial to the veterans from World War II. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fernandez?
You just mentioned, thanks for coming in, Colonel Rainville, that the installation in Borden, or a Sherman tank installation in Borden, that they didn't have any work needed to be done. But wouldn't that have come out of their budget and not out of public funds?
The one in London, the First Hussars, that came out of their budget. They maintained that as part of their regimental council funding. The one in Borden, they maintain that through fundraising as well. The whole principle behind this monument, as I mentioned before, is that the government is offering them out to communities, and the communities have to make a commitment in order to finance that particular monument. There are, as I shared with Mr. Chapman, there are places we can apply for some funding to help with putting up plaques and things like that as well, to support that. What we're going to be doing, though, is we're going to be doing fundraising for that. We want to kick off a fundraising schedule starting in September to run through to December. And we are going out to industry leaders to help support that. Bernie Malul, who I mentioned before, you know that name around this particular table and around the region, he has been able to get people to commit to provide material or services in kind in order to support that, so to reduce the cost So this is a community commitment, and that's what Canada Company is asking for, a community commitment, rather than this being an imposed monument placed by the federal government.
And just so, because I wasn't at that at the council meeting when this was originally discussed, an application has to be submitted and then it has to be accepted. That doesn't necessarily mean that we would absolutely get that.
That's right. There are 250 that are set aside for that particular purpose. At this point, I understand there's only about 35 communities that have applied.
Okay. Right.
And what we hoped to do, and if we can, is have a lav in the Oktoberfest Thanksgiving parade on a float. That's one of the services that one of our trucking companies has committed to do, so that we can put a banner on that to explain what it's all about and get national press so that it can be broadcast across Canada, so more communities can see what is being offered to them and maybe take a chance and go for it.
So my last question to you is you talk about it being a reminder of what our community has done in Afghanistan.
That's right.
But what about the people who have PTSD, who are suffering from post-traumatic stress from fighting in Afghanistan? Is this not a daily reminder of the horrors of what they suffered? I mean, a memorial is one thing because it's not as blatant a reminder. I guess I'm trying to look at both sides of it.
I understand.
And I mean, have you considered that possibility? It could be very
the
difficult.
Regimental Council is always concerned about PTSD. One of the things that the statistics, I don't know if most people are aware of it, but Canada, the military, is expecting the possibility of up to 25% of the people that served over there could experience PTSD. But what they're seeing now is that the PTSD is obviously psychological, that they're experiencing flashbacks and things like that. We in the Regimental Council have a group that gets together on a monthly basis to meet with people to talk about that. And in talking about that, we've brought up this particular issue, and they are supportive of this particular monument. That's not the thing that scares them. That was the thing that was protecting them.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Any other questions of Colonel Rainville? Colonel Rainville, just one from myself. So the lavs that we're talking about have all been used more recently in Afghanistan, which was more of a peacemaking versus a peacekeeping mission.
That's right.
But have they also been used by our military in peacekeeping missions elsewhere as well? Okay.
They've been used in Haiti after the earthquake and the tidal wave. They were used in that particular area as part of peacekeeping and assistance to the police forces in Haiti, in Somalia. And they were just coming online when Bosnia-Herzegovina, when the breakup of Yugoslavia was taking place. It was just starting to become available at that time.
Okay, thank you very much. That would be all the questions we have, so if you want to take your seat.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
But just one other point.
Yep.
If you saw the things about the fires out west and when the Canadian Army was out there, you saw bunches of them being used as transport there.
Okay, thank you, sir. Councillor Gazzola, you wanted to move the motion? And if you can just maybe provide some clarity on exactly what you're moving, including on the maintenance part.
Okay, I have two parts. The first part, I would like to move it's option number 1, and to support the application for the Kitchener-based monument, and that's the motion that was deferred. So I'd like to move that again. I would also like to move a different approach temporarily on the maintenance part of it. I would like to see us as a city to call for proposals from service organizations in the community to see if they would take on the opportunity to look after the maintenance of the site in the future. I don't think it would be a costly venture, and yet I know that there are a lot of service organizations that like to do things like that for the community, and this would give them an opportunity. I had also was thinking in mind of even groups like our Kitchener Firefighters Association, who like to do things like that, and who I understand also had some of their own members who served in Afghanistan. So that would be part of my recommendation, and that failing, and I don't think it would happen, but failing that we wouldn't get any group coming forth, that the city then take on the responsibility of the maintenance in future years, and I think it can be handled by setting aside a small amount of money in year one to let it provide for the funding that's required in the future. But hopefully some organization will come to the plate, or even individuals might do that to look after that part of it.
Okay, so just so we're clear, the first part of the motion then that you're moving is that we provide the letter of support to locate it at the Kitchener Armory on federal property at 350 East Avenue, and that $10,000 be approved as our contribution towards the installation. Yes. So that's the first part. Yes. And then the second part is that you're suggesting we work with the Royal Highland Fusiliers in seeing if collectively we can find someone to take on the responsibility of maintenance. And in the absence of that, would it come back here, or are you suggesting a certain amount if after a reasonable amount of time
I'd like to see it come back here.
You'd like to see it come back.
But I have to make it clear that if we're not successful, we are taking on an additional minor burden in the future. But okay. I don't think it'll be that great. And if I could just speak to the motion.
If you can, and then I'll just maybe ask Mr. Chapman for some clarity in terms of that direction, or if you'd like something just a little clearer. Maybe I'll ask for that clarity first. Mr. Chapman?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I actually like the way Councillor Gazzola characterized his motion originally. It struck me as being fairly efficient, that we'll do our best to canvass for interest in supporting. Failing that, I understood him to be really looking at option 2 here. And so what I'd suggest is that I don't know there's a need for that to come back to Council. We'll certainly keep you apprised of who we're consulting with and what the outcome is of that. But I like the fact that there is a default here so that it's clear to the group and clear to us how we're proceeding.
So are you okay with that?
That's good. Sure.
Okay, so they'll work at it, and your amount is 5,000 as suggested as the backup? Okay. Yes, just before I let you speak, Councillor Ioannidis, you're seconding that? No, but you're seconding? Yes. Okay, thank you. Over to you, Councillor Gazzola.
And I'm pleased. I want to thank the group for giving us this opportunity. It is really important that we remember what people that have gone out and put their life on the line to protect our way of life here, and we're really, as it was mentioned, we're recognizing their service. And when we can put our head in the sand and say, it never happened, it happened. And unfortunately, when it's happened, I think it's something that we need to remember, we need to look back on, and I think it's a great education tool for our families. Before I came to Kitchener, I was in London, and I remember the memorial in Victoria Park. I think it's Victoria Park. It's been that kids not only climbed all over it and had a good time, but also were aware of what it represented. So I think it's a good way to go.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Gazzola. Councillor Ioannidis.
Yeah, through you, Mayor Urbanovic, I just echo the comments made by Councillor Gazzola. I think it's a great. Instead of just having an ordinary plaque or anything like that, I think the real educational value we'll be getting is, especially with kids seeing the physical armory there that they'll get a sense of what things were, and I think that's what's important there, and that's what will be lost. So that's why I'm glad to see this here.
Councillor Marsh.
Thank you. I agree with the comments made by Councillor Gazzola and Councillor Ioannidis that it's very important that we recognize the importance of the role that our military plays. I do also just want to comment that perhaps there's a very natural group that could step forward to do some ongoing light-duty maintenance, and that would be the cadets that train right there in front of where it will be located. So that would be lovely to see them. It's just a natural fit.
Any other comments? Councillor Fernandez?
I kind of struggled with this because I was really concerned with the impact on our veterans who have been in Afghanistan and know personally of somebody who's suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder. We have some lovely memorials around our community that commemorate our war dead and the people who fought for freedom for this country. I personally do not feel I can support this particular installation at this time for that particular reason, and I just want that to be understood. I understand that we need a way to educate our children about what sacrifices our Canadians have made, both in peacekeeping and in fighting, and I'm just not comfortable with this particular installation. So I just wanted to put that out there for my own personal reasons. Thank you.
Any other comments? I'll just briefly make a comment. I will be supporting this recommendation this evening, and pleased with the suggestion that came from Councillor Gazzola on looking at an alternative with respect to the ongoing maintenance. I recognize that sometimes a vehicle of this nature may, by some in our community, in light of our community's heritage, particularly around peace building and so on, be a bit of a struggle. But I think at the same time it's also, in particular because it will be on DFD lands. I think it's also an important reminder of the sacrifices that have been made by the men and women of our various branches of the Canadian Forces, and the fact that it has the support of our regimental council as a means of remembering those sacrifices and their involvement to really, from what I've seen and that we've all seen last time in terms of a proposed monument. I think it is a way to appropriately commemorate those individuals, and also for it to be an ongoing monument that will allow people to reflect on the past, not just more recently, but historically when we think back to World War I and World War II, and some of the sacrifices that have been made by people for our country and for democracy in throughout the world. So with that, a recorded vote has been requested. All those in favor? Opposed? That motion is carried. Thank you, Colonel Rainville. Staff will work with you then on the details in the weeks going forward.
Thank you very much.
We'll now move on to item 6D. Andy Hook. Welcome back, Andy, and as promised, you got your second 5 minutes.
Good enough. I thank you very much, and I was very rude the first time. I thank you for the permission to talk for the 5 minutes.
No problem.
Okay. I'm here because I'm a little concerned lately, as every taxpayer in the city of Kitchener is. I'm seeing things that are happening lately that are a little bit discouraging. I was told that I can't talk about one item because that is regional, so I'll bypass that and I'll go to what I thought was important. Lately, as I said before, I've been walking up and down King Street in the morning. I walk about 4 miles a day, which is unimportant to you people, but I'd like to ask all of you, one time in your busy day, if once in a while you get up real early, of which probably all of you do, and walk down King Street. Walk down our community and see what takes place early in the morning. Because I think some of you would be very enlightened if you would see what occasionally happens between the hours of 6:30 and 8:30. It's come to my opinion in some cases that the taxpayer's dollar is not being used in the proper way. And I'll give you the example that I see every day. Every day I see young ladies that are gardeners, and I'm not picking on the females at all, it could be two gentlemen. But every day I see two ladies that are walking up King Street and picking litter out of the flower boxes and wherever the litter is there. And I see a truck that drops them off. And I always thought that Kitchener had a no idling bylaw, and I was under the opinion that we did. But I see that truck move up King Street 700 feet, pull over, wait till the ladies come up to that 700 feet, drop a little bit of litter into the back of the pickup box, then the truck goes and moves up the street another 700 feet and parks, leaves the truck running. And really, as a taxpayer, the work ethic, as far as I'm concerned, is not there. Because we're having 3 people do a job that basically could be done by 2 people. Those 2 people could be dropped off at the beginning of their start of their work and picked up at the end of whatever criteria it is, whether it be the whole length of King Street down to Victoria Street. But to run a truck and to have all the trucks in this area right now working on a project that are diesel, and they're idling too, to me, in the city's interest, I think it's a waste of our money, and it's a waste of taxpayers' money. Also, I have to confess, I've never been happy with the green barrel system. I worked in mechanical trades. I'm a steam fitter. I'm a plumber. I used to work on natural gas. And to see every month on my utility bill a $13 charge for water, it drives me over the falls. Because I would say to every one of you people, go on your internet and check a thing called the Chicago Diversion. It is a treaty between the United States and Canada that gives them unlimited water that they take out of Chicago and put down a canal and run it into the Mississippi River to keep the water level up in the Mississippi, so the barge level. And yet the taxpayers in this area are paying on a residential evaluation $13 a month for a rain barrel. I know I'm not the only one that's aggravated about it, but I think that there should be some real good look at this. I know that it costs money for pipes. I worked in the trade for a long time. I worked and slugged in the trade for a long time. But in some cases, we're getting a little shabby as far as the rainwater goes, because I had a brand new installation of a street in front of my house, and all your catch basins are inserted into tar and blacktop, just like you have in your thing. When I was younger, and everyone in this room was younger, it was all done in concrete. That blacktop is not going to stay there. When you got winter, you got plows and everything else. It's a case that we're doing stuff a little shabbier than what we used to do, and I would hope that we get back to doing things a little bit better, because I think it's all going to come and catch up to us again. I appreciate that you did give me a couple of minutes to talk in regards to that Agnes. I'm a little concerned also, point of view,
I can just ask you to start wrapping up, please.
That the Waterloo Street, that being closed, I'm hoping that the city is not kowtowing to the people with deep pockets, because it's a real inconvenience every time they close a street. As I passed on to you at the chair, Mr. Mayor, there is a lot of inconvenience going on right now for people. I think that when the city does their newspaper things about the roads that are closed, I think it would be advantageous not to put the roads that are closed, but the roads that are opened. because there sure is a lot of closed roads, and there's a lot of irritated people that are driving all over the city now and are not friendly to anybody. With that, I'll end it. Thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. We have one question for you, Councillor Fernandez.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Hook. Just for clarification, because I sat on the Environmental Committee when we talked about an anti-idling bylaw a number of years ago. We were never able to get an anti-idling bylaw for the city, but what we did get was an agreement from our fleet division that we would not idle our vehicles unless the temperature was below a certain threshold or above a certain threshold. So I think you're raising a very important issue. And I see that our Deputy CIO, Mr. Tehegi, is here today, and I'm sure he will bring that back to our operations. It is something that the Environmental Committee has always been concerned about. So I thank you for bringing that to our attention. The other question I have, you are talking about the stormwater fee that is on your water bill. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And have you, do you have rain barrels?
I have 3 rain barrels.
Okay. Have you applied for a credit?
No.
Okay. So you can, and it does make a difference. I would strongly suggest that you do that. I know a number of people across the city who take advantage of that. It reduces your fee. And by collecting the rainwater, you are helping us keep the stormwater a little bit cleaner because you're taking some of that runoff on your property. And I thank you for doing that as well.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for coming in this evening, Mr. Hook.
No problem.
If perhaps staff can get you the information, if you perhaps give Mr. Chapman your contacts, we can get you the information on how to apply for that stormwater fee.
No problem. Thank you
or
very
that
much.
stormwater reduction, rather.
No problem.
I'm sure you don't want to apply for an extra fee.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to the next item, which is Clause 10 on the Community and Infrastructures Committee report with respect to West Heights Drive. And I have numerous delegations with respect to that. The first one is Joyce Edmonds. Welcome, Ms. Edmonds.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I am Joyce Edmond, and I have been a resident of West Heights Drive for 38 years. I have come here tonight to be the voice of the residents and taxpayers on West Heights Drive. You want to dedicate 45% of the traffic area of West Heights Drive to the cyclists. This is 5.4 meters for cyclists versus 6.6 meters for cars. While the cyclists represent less than 5% of the traffic on our street, and then you want to take away our parking. This does not make sense to me. 45% of the road for less than 5% of bicycle traffic? At the 2 meetings that you held for the residents, you were met with great opposition to this plan. Your door-to-door survey included a total of 232 properties which abut or are adjacent to West Heights Drive. You received a response from 116 homes, concluding a 64.7% in favor, a total shock to all of us. Our survey is from West Heights Drive only. We are the residents who are directly impacted by these proposed changes. In our survey, we reached 251 homes with a response from 201 homes. 164 were opposed, 24 in favor, and 13 undecided. This is a support rate of 12% with an objection rate of 82%. How can we be so far apart? How did you reach your numbers? How can the same survey produce such drastic differences? Forest Heights already has trails that follow or mirror West Heights Drive via the hydro lines. This trail runs from Bent Willow Drive to McGarry Drive, hooking up to the Sandrock Greenway. These trails are used by cyclists and walkers. The money you propose to spend could be better used improving and marking the present trails. I understand from the residents that back onto the Sandrock Greenway, it is in great need of repair. $120,000 is a lot of taxpayers' money to waste on supercycle lanes that aren't needed or wanted by the residents, and all for less than 5% of bicycle traffic. West Heights Drive is a residential U-shaped street that goes nowhere. I'm sorry, but it will never become a great collector route, as quoted by Peter Deeds. As for traffic calming, you could expand the 40-kilometer speed zone to be greater than 1 block. The students walk much farther in either direction, so why not extend that 40-kilometer radius to at least Driftwood Drive for their safety? You plan to install a roadway narrowing in front of West Heights School. I don't understand this when you have traffic lights and a crossing guard posted there, another unnecessary cost. You're also proposing a concrete refuge island at or near Blackwell and West Heights Drive. Why not install a 3-way stop at Rolling Meadows Drive and West Heights so pedestrians can cross safely, and this will help to calm the traffic. This is a very busy intersection. For parking, you acknowledge that the traffic is dangerous to cyclists, but you want our guests, grandchildren, and elderly parents to navigate crossing all this traffic on West Heights Drive to get to the other side. In the winter, with the volume of snow we receive, this will create an even greater danger. Removing parking will also increase illegal parking and U-turns. Many residents want the street left alone, but you have indicated that we are getting bicycle lanes. We don't want or need supercycle lanes with buffer zone. Our road is large enough to accommodate a regular cycle lane and parking on both sides. If you want the road to be 2 lanes, I suggest you remove the white dotted line and traffic can still proceed safely around the left-hand turns. Taking everything into account, I believe that you can't ignore the overwhelming response we have received from the residents of West Heights Drive. Please don't waste $120,000 on changes that aren't wanted, aren't practical, or necessary. With 82% of residents objecting this, it can't be ignored. Quoting Doug Struthers, "From the outset, staff has single-mindedly pushed a radical plan that disregards the safety and convenience of residents in favor of a chosen few. You have the opportunity to set things right by voting no to supersized bike lanes. Please consider a sensible alternative that balances the safety and needs of all West Heights Drive users. I would like to present you with the petition, and I thank you for allowing me to voice your opinion."
Okay. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, please, there's no clapping permitted in the council chamber, so I'd ask you to please restrain yourself in that regard. There is a question for you, ma'am. Councillor Yanetsky.
Thank you for coming in and making your presentation and acknowledging that there's a strong opposition that you had done from your research and surveying. Are you here basically representing yourself or a number of residents on
I'm
West
representing
Heights?
all the residents because I spoke to all the residents. I surveyed West Heights Drive. I walked it with helpers twice and 3 times going to homes so that I could reach as many people as possible. In my report, we surveyed 251 homes and got responses from 201 homes. I think that's remarkable. And of those 201 homes, 82% objected. And the people thanked me for taking on this task and saying, "I am so happy you are doing it. We do not want this. We do not want this on West Heights Drive. Why are we being forced to have this done?"
My next question would be, was maybe partially answered already, but just for the record, could you have your group of people put their hands up who are in support of yours? Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have no further questions.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, what did your questionnaire say when you were...
What did when we approached the homes, the petition read that we were opposing the supercycle bike lanes and the loss of parking on the street. Yeah, if I could have it. Thank you. We want this present proposal stopped. We were also informed that we had to inform all of the residents that their names would go on record on City Council. So we did another canvass of the street advising every resident of that. We asked them if they would like their name removed to please call. We had 2 people that called us and asked to have their name removed, and we had another resident call and say, please add me, I was missed.
Thank you. Where do you, can I ask, where do you live on the?
I'm at 519.
So where is
I'm up past West Heights School, and I'm very concerned with the speed limit because the 40-kilometer speed limit is 1 block, the block of the school and a few homes on the hill on West Heights Drive. I have many students that walk past my house to the second Driftwood, and Driftwood is 40 kilometers an hour and doesn't even have a school. And with the traffic on West Heights Drive, I would think it would be a no-brainer that we would have 40 kilometers further along. The radius would be much greater to protect those students.
Thank you.
Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you, Joyce, for coming in and bringing your opinion. So you're saying, what I'm understanding is that the residents that supported your position are saying they don't want the super cycle lanes.
Correct.
But they would support bike lanes
of a regular size
and
keep our parking.
And keep the parking.
Yes.
Okay. I just want to make sure that I understand that completely. Okay. Sorry. The pedestrian refuge islands, would you still support those?
No.
Why not?
I would rather see a 3-way stop because the traffic will actually stop. If you put a refuge island in, you still have to make it out there. In the wintertime, it's a hazard for the plows. And if the traffic has to stop, it does calm it. We have 2 3-way stops already on West Heights Drive, one at McGarry and one at Queen.
Okay. My experience with 3-way stops is that most people just roll through them. But
not on West Heights Drive, they won't.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Edison, just before we do that, I do see there are transportation services staff here, so if I can ask to make sure that we're keeping track of some of the questions that are being asked, and at the end of all the delegations, I'll be asking you to try to respond to some of these, as many of these issues as possible. Councillor Edison.
Well, that's where I wanted to go there, Mr. Mayor, because I think part of the new report is, my understanding is some of the traffic islands will be removed. That's correct, right? So I mean, I think maybe staff should give it at least a 5-minute, presentation, at least to inform what the changes are, because I don't think the residents are fully aware of some of the changes.
Okay. Well,
if I may say something.
The information was shared with Council, Councillor Gazzola.
I believe we are aware that one of the refuge islands has been removed.
Okay.
The one down by Autumn Hill Crescent.
Okay, at the end of this delegation, I'll ask staff to come down and speak to your questions. Councillor Marsh.
I'm not finished.
Okay, go ahead.
I have a question. Thanks, Joyce, for coming in and speaking with passion. That's good. I can appreciate that. So you did mention to Councillor Fernandez that you're okay with having bike lanes. Your most concern is the buffers. Is that correct?
Well, yeah. Okay. What do we need super cycle bicycle lanes for less than 5% of traffic? I understand you had people out there doing a survey of bicycle traffic. I actually think the bicycle traffic's 3% or less. Okay. It's very low, and this just doesn't make sense. And across the road from us on East Forest Trail and West Forest Trail, you have regular bicycle lanes and parking on both sides of the street. So why would you do West Heights Drive different when it creates one huge circle? It doesn't make sense. Why not line them up and have them be the same?
Okay. Well, I think staff will have their point of view through that. Did you manage to attend both of the meetings? And
yes.
Okay.
And we responded. My husband wrote letters for both.
Okay. And how did you feel those meetings went?
The second meeting we walked out, it was like a kangaroo zoo.
Okay.
Very disorganized. There was no microphone for anybody to ask questions. I was thoroughly disgusted. I've been to other meetings that I've attended because of other property we own, and we've always had a microphone to go up to. People lined up to ask their questions. It was very organized. There was no front table we didn't know who was who. I was not impressed.
Because I was at the second meeting.
I know you were. I saw you there.
There was a table in the front there.
Well, there were people placed all around the room as well.
Okay.
Okay? It wasn't it's not like here where I'm talking to all of you and you are interacting with me and I'm interacting with you. It wasn't that way.
What I experienced there was after the meeting, I had several residents come to me and explain that they were fearful of expressing their opinions because there was a vocal group there that was adamantly opposed. So I think that was the reason the transition is why staff went door to door to get more of an accurate reading. So did city staff come to your door?
No, and nothing was left in my mailbox.
Okay, because it did say here they didn't come to your house twice.
Yeah, that's what it says, but
there was no answer. But that's okay.
I didn't receive anything.
Okay, that's all I wanted. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, Councillor Marsh.
Thank you for coming in and presenting your opinions. I really like your idea of having a longer stretch for the 40-kilometer-an-hour speed limit. I'm a big fan of that. I can appreciate your concerns, but I want to ask you if you're aware that best practices for research would indicate that when the individual conducting the research has already formed an opinion about the question, that the results are typically skewed. Because when you go and you share that this is what you're asking for your neighbors to support you, and they don't want to say no. Are you aware of that?
I didn't have that issue at all. When I presented myself to their door, I asked them if they were aware of the changes on West Heights Drive. The majority of the people said, yes, I am, and I do not want it. And I can only say that the petition that is signed speaks for itself. I did not push anybody.
Nobody. I'm not suggesting you pushed anybody, but it's just it's a typical response. So I have another question. Have you ever been riding on a bicycle and had a car door open right in front of you?
No, I haven't.
No.
I've ridden a bike. I've done a lot of cycling, but I've never had that happen. But the whole time I was canvassing, and I spent many hours on the street doing it, I'm going to tell you that if I saw 10 cyclists, that's it. And I would really love to know what your results were for the canvas, the survey you were doing the Friday that I was out there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, those are all the questions that members of council have. I just have one, actually two questions. Number one, are you a cyclist yourself?
Presently, no. I don't cycle right now. Okay. I did.
Okay. And then the other question I have is, are you aware that through considerable input and so on from other members of the community, we've heard that people are looking for more interconnected, walkable, cyclable neighborhoods, and these are some of the steps towards that?
I do walk your trails, and I walk the streets because I'm a walker. And I am aware that you want to implement cycling lanes. My question to that is, why is East Forest Trail and West Forest Trail single bicycle lanes with parking on both sides, and you want to do this to West Heights? It doesn't make sense. I can't rationalize that.
Sure,
okay.
And we can have staff respond to that, but I suspect some of that has to do with timing of when that was approved and when this is being approved. But we can ask staff to comment on that. So thank you. That's all delegations. If I can ask staff to come down and speak to Councillor Ioannidis's question in terms of the changes to the report before we continue on with delegations. Mr. Reedman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So following committee a couple weeks ago, staff were directed to look into a few questions. One of them was to confirm when maintenance of the Sandrock Greenway path has been scheduled by community services staff. So we've passed that comment on to our parks area and they'll be responding. And then we also looked at removing the refuge islands because there was a concern around snow clearing. So Ken Carmichael, and another staff person and the councillor met with residents in the one location, and we've agreed to remove both of the refuge islands with a plan to keep a painted refuge area there, as well as some of the islands that house the stop signs, which we've gotten historic complaints on. We're proposing to put oversized stop signs on either side of the road to remove those obstacles as well, because there have been complaints in the past about snow clearing at those two locations. The other change that we've made based on comments that we've heard is to add a right turn lane at McGarry Drive and Queens Boulevard, because there's concerns around congestion with it only being one lane at the all-way stop at those two locations. So those are the main changes to the plan since our last committee meeting.
Okay, thank you. We'll now continue then with delegations, and then we'll come to staff to sort of respond to some of the issues from all the delegations at the end. With that, Chris Klein. Welcome, Mr. Klein.
Mayor Verbanovic and members of council. I'm here on behalf of the Tri-Cities Transport Action Group today to ask for your support on the proposed improvements for West Heights. I'm sure you've read the staff report we've just been talking about it, so I'll call out a couple of key facts. One is that there's nowhere near enough traffic on West Heights to warrant 4 lanes. And there's far more space devoted to parking now than is ever used. Still, it's worth asking the question, why not leave well enough alone? And I respect the previous delegate for that. However, the fact is that these conditions make normal people speed when they're driving. 85th percentile speeds on the report at 58 kilometers an hour basically means that you've got 1 in 6 people who are averaging 60 kilometers an hour or more on West Heights. Wide open roads with wide lanes just do this to people. And when people drive fast, accidents are more frequent and more severe. I believe the report said that there were 41 accidents in 3 years on West Heights. I mean, how often do we hear about speeding traffic in our neighborhoods? I mean, I hear all this talk about convincing people to slow down, but many of us just drive according to the conditions, and the conditions on West Heights are ripe for speeding. Well, we can't have speed humps anymore because they break fire trucks and the buses. Enforcement is expensive and is temporary, and speed limit signs don't generally affect the way that people drive. So you can mark the street down to 40. It's not going to change the fact that people are still driving 60 or more. So what you can do is you can change the street. If a road doesn't feel wide open, more people slow down. Switching West Heights away from 4 wide lanes to 2 slightly narrower lanes will make people drive naturally more slowly. It's going to feel more like a neighborhood street and less like a highway. Switching to 2 lanes with slower drivers is also going to make it a lot easier for children and folks on foot to cross safely, and that's before the fact that there will be room for crossing islands. I'm somewhat disappointed to hear that some of them have been removed, but even if there is a refuge space there, that's still beneficial. You have to think about, for instance, kids who are walking to West Heights Public School or St. Mark, or maybe you're going to the plaza or church or to catch a bus. For a lot of people, West Heights is on the way or in the way. This plan will make West Heights a lot more enjoyable for pedestrians. Again, it'll feel more like a neighborhood street. It is an inexpensive change. It's very similar to how you've handled East Avenue, which I've been down to and seems to be working just fine. There's a lot of bang for buck here for the cost of paints and for a few pedestrian refuge islands. And I haven't even mentioned the bike lanes yet. I mean, of course, I am interested in them, and I'm not the only one. I mean, you could talk about being able to bike along the Greenway as if having one trail nearby is enough. But what if it doesn't get you where you're going or where you're coming from? I mean, if you don't live right on the Greenway, you're probably dealing with West Heights. Maybe that means biking on the sidewalk, which is illegal and is an added risk at every driveway. More likely, you're not biking at all. This street is an important link. Look, if I came here and I said you should block off one end of West Heights to cut down on the through traffic, no one would agree with me. And that's because despite the fact that West Heights is a neighborhood street, it is there to connect the neighborhood, to let people get where they're going. And you should enable that for everybody, and not just people in cars and the 1% of people who are confident in cycling under every conditions. And that's the crux of the issue. With respect, The state of West Heights Drive matters more to people than just the residents on West Heights Drive. It affects the whole neighborhood and beyond. Having safe streets matters to all of Kitchener. Having a safe and connected cycling network matters to all of Kitchener. And if you don't follow through on providing these things on West Heights Drive, the effects will be felt in all of Kitchener. And that's why I am here today, asking you for support of this proposal. I am open to taking any questions, and I hope you will support this. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Klein. We have two questions. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Mr. Klein, for coming in. And can you just repeat which organization you represent and what it entails?
I am here on behalf of Tri-Cities Transport Action Group, or TriTAG. We are a grassroots organization who want to see better walking, cycling, and transit in the region of Waterloo. We are looking for dignity in these modes and being able to get around more of our region through active transportation, through public transit, that sort of thing. So that's the main reason why I'm here today.
Okay. And with your knowledge in the industry, because of through your association with your organization, what do people tell you about bike lanes in general? Like,
well, one of the things that comes up is whether the bike lanes are appropriate for the street they're on. In this particular case, I think we are looking. The plan is for a buffered bike lane, or a supersized bike lane, as some have been referring to it. One of the things that does is makes the space for cycling more comfortable. There are not a lot of cyclists by mode share on West Heights right now, but you don't choose to build a bridge based on how many people are swimming across the river. One of the things that really comes out is that depending on the street, if it's a very quiet street, you can get away with regular bike lanes with no buffer. If you have parking, you do have to consider the danger of things like dooring, which was already mentioned. The fact is, if you take away that buffer, there will be some who still use it, but there will also be many who may not. And I'm actually thinking about, in particular, the kind of enabling of cycling within the neighborhood with schools in it and stuff like that, how comfortable are you with your child riding in a painted bike lane, or a painted bike lane with an extra half-meter buffer, or a protected bike lane or a separate roadside trail? And roadside trails wouldn't work on West Heights anyway, because engineers would take one look at the amount of driveways they cross and say that is far too risky. So basically, when it comes to West Heights, I think this is actually a really positive move. The balance is one, of course, of how much space that you need for parking versus the room that you are dedicating to cycling. And I would go and I would look and say, well, how much space does the street need for parking? And you have that data. It's right in the staff report for you. If there is concern about crossing the street, because you cannot park on the same side of the street as you could before, there is at least the fact that the street is a whole lot safer to cross now.
Okay. And my last question, do you have any studies or data that have been done for considering with the buffered bike lanes over what was on West Heights Drive on West Forest Trail and East Forest Trail, like the difference?
Did I bring any with me today?
Yeah, or is there any reference or anything like that, or from your experience?
I believe what I've seen is basically just a greater adoption by a greater number of and range in age of people based on the circumstances, the comfort level of the bike infrastructure. There's a common breakdown of people who will always bike no matter what. They're fearless. There are only about 1% of people. You've got about 7 to 8% of people 7 to 8% who are they're confident, but they're concerned. They will bike in a lot of situations. These people would probably find West Heights in its current form not too much of a problem. There is about a third of people who will never bike. No way, no how. It's the group in between, the 60 or so % of people who basically say, yeah, they're interested, but they're concerned. They will not typically jump on an unpainted road. And if it is, depending on the road, if it is simply a painted bike lane, they may not choose that. It does depend on the context. And I think that's where you have to look to your staff to say, this is the kind of road we have, or the street we have. What is the appropriate infrastructure here? And do we really need the room for anything else?
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Klein.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Excuse me, do you live on West Heights?
Okay,
I do not live on West
Just
Heights.
hold on before you answer that. Councillor Gazzola, I made an error earlier because when you asked that question, I allowed it to continue. And you'll recall that under MFIPA, we've been advised by the clerk we can't ask delegations if they reside on a street.
Oh, thank you, Mayor. Nonetheless, I respect
ladies
that.
and gentlemen, I'm sorry, but we're obligated to follow provincial legislation, and I'm simply reminding Councillor Gazzola of that. If the delegation, Madam Clerk, if the delegation chooses to answer that question, are they permitted to? Yes. So it's up to you if you want to answer that or not.
Well, through you, Mayor, I do not reside in West Heights. I do visit the neighborhood. I do bike and drive in the neighborhood from time to time.
Okay, thank you.
Well, the next question I was going to ask, and I don't know if I can ask it, do you live near West Heights? Can I
Is
ask
there a certain range within West Heights
I'm
before
just
my opinion
curious
matters?
as to, what I'm trying to get at is, do you use West Heights as a cyclist or pedestrian now? And
Yes,
if
I
you
do.
do, how often?
Approximately once a month.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Councillor Davey.
Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Klein. Well spoken. I'm wrestling with this myself, and I guess my question from the area that you come from and your expertise is West Heights, with the traffic volumes that it has and the narrowing of the lanes as proposed. My understanding is the narrowing of the lanes in and of themselves will help to reduce the speed in some respects. So my question is, being that it is an enclosed road, is there some wiggle room from your vantage in terms of the width of the lanes and the buffer versus the residents clearly, I think, that would like some more parking? I truly believe that it should be a single lane, or, well, 2 lanes instead of 4. But my understanding from what I've heard from the residents so far is parking is a big issue. Mm-hmm. If the buffer were to be reduced, or the lanes were to be reduced on that particular street, because we're not talking about an Ottawa street or a major road, do you think it would significantly impact the number of cyclists that would use it?
I think that if you were able to show, and this is me being, I'll be completely open about this. I think if you were able to show that there's sufficient room on the street to reintroduce parking while avoiding the danger of dooring, having these cycle lanes become too narrow, and having them too close proximity to parked vehicles, then I think there is some wiggle room, if you like. Again, I would say that it comes back to your judgment about whether or not a street that typically has, I believe it's something like 6% parking utilization, needs parking on both sides in exchange for this. It is a trade-off, and I know that there's a lot of people behind me who don't agree with the stance that I have. However, as one of the visitors to West Heights, when I go there, I am the one parking on the street, and I regard the street as quite wide and quite threatening to cross right now. I believe that would be reduced in a situation with two lanes and clearly marked bike lanes.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? There don't appear to be. Thank you very much, Mr.
Thank you.
Clyde. Our next delegation is Stuart Chandler. Welcome, Mr. Chandler.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Thanks for this opportunity to address this issue, and I'm back again because I care about the safety of everyone who uses West Heights Drive and the most logical and effective use of taxpayers' money. I believe that neither of these groups are well served by the so-called preferred alternative presented by staff from the Infrastructure Services Department. In the first place, there was no other alternative offered, so it should never have been called a preferred alternative. You didn't have a choice. And I attended the 2 meetings, and at both meetings there seemed to be The idea was out there that no matter what we did, we were going to get the bike lanes, that we had no way of objecting to those. At this point, I need to commend Councillor Bill Ioannidis and Ken Carmichael and the other staff for meeting with Kathy Pegalo and myself on site 2 days after the August 10 meeting to discuss the value of the refuge island proposed for Autumn Hill. We were pleased when they decided it was not necessary to install. As I stated before, I'm a huge proponent of increased bicycle traffic. I'm a cyclist myself. Lived on the street for 28 years. And I'm just, as I said before, not so narrow-minded that I believe every street deserves bike lanes, or that even if bike lanes might be helpful, which many of the residents indicated that they thought the bike lanes might be okay, that they need to be such grandiose ones as are proposed. Splashing paint on a roadway is not necessarily going to get cyclists out on the road or to make their trip any safer unless it's done intelligently. The present plan is definitely not an intelligent use of either paint, cement, or taxpayers' money. In these times of fiscal austerity, we need to look closely at every expenditure to see if it is the best use of all our resources. $120,000 may not seem like a lot of money to people who routinely look at budget lines much larger, but I would challenge every member of council to bike through or drive through your own ward to see if there are not some roads in your area that could use a portion of that money to make more needed improvements for cyclists. And seriously consider sending this misbegotten plan back to the drawing board. Let me explain why you should turn this plan down and give the city staff involved the opportunity to redeem themselves. I'm sure they can do better, especially if they actually consult with the relevant public as opposed to the folks at the market. When I read the record report, and this was already mentioned about the quote from Peter Deedy, a representative of the city's Cycling and Trails Committee, predicting West Heights will become a great collector route. West Heights will never become a great collector route, and for a couple of good reasons. First, the record reporter nailed it in his first paragraph. He called it a U-shaped street. It's not a drive. It's a 2.6 kilometer crescent, and one that Conestoga Expressway has relegated to being a backwater area. One only needs basic map reading skills to see that anyone biking in the area would only use West Heights for a short distance. There are community trails in the interior of that crescent, linking roads that allow cyclists to cut across and avoid much lengthier semicircular West Heights route. I use them all the time, and second, West Heights has that long, steep hill that leads up to the public school, and cyclists hate hills, so, or at least the ones that the staff is trying to promote, and so they use the community trails once again because they're less steep. This is why the area cyclists would prefer to see the money spent on improving and expanding those trails that have been allowed to lapse in a very poor condition in places. The bike traffic, for that matter, car traffic, will never be numerous enough to justify such an elaborate and ostentatious use of paint and misuse of road space. I must say that I just got a call today from a woman who called and said she couldn't come in tonight, but hoped that I'd pass on the reason she's very opposed to losing the parking on her side.
Mr. Chandler, if you can please wrap up.
She was saying that parents are dropping off and picking up their kids from St. Mark's School just around the corner use that space twice every day, every school day, and would have nowhere else to park, and then would have to go across the street, across traffic to get there. Anyway, I can appreciate councillors walk a fine line to balance the best interests of residents, staff, pressure groups, and taxpayers. Must be a tough job, require tough decisions. A large percentage of the residents of West Height are trusting that city councillors will agree that this is the time when so-called alternatives should be withdrawn in order to be replaced with one that is a compromise we can live with. So I'm begging councillors to turn this down so that it can be have another look at it.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Any questions for the delegation? There don't appear to be. Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Okay, our next delegation is Mr. Doug Struthers.
Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I oppose staff's recommendation to remove parking from West Heights Drive to install supersized bike lanes. This plan gives highly preferential treatment to a small number of users while ignoring safety consequences for everyone else. I support a sensible alternative that balances the safety of everyone by retaining parking and providing conventional bike lanes. I am not anti-bike. I'm a cycling enthusiast who is pro-common sense. By comparison to the proposed plan, the region recently unveiled proposed designs for adjacent Highland Road, which provide conventional 1.5 meter bike lanes. It does not make sense to connect supersized bike lanes on a 50-kilometer residential street to conventional 1.5 meter bike lanes on a busy 4-lane, 70-kilometer-an-hour regional road. Removing parking to install supersized bike lanes will adversely affect the safety of cyclists, residents, and visitors. For example, removing parking from one side means that half of all visitors will now have to cross this street. Visitors, delivery trucks, service vehicles, the city's own vehicles will stop or park in the traffic lane, creating a serious safety hazard by forcing drivers to go around into the opposing traffic lane. U-turns will increase dramatically as vehicles access the parking on the other side of the street. Experts agree that on-street parking provides a traffic calming effect. Opening up the street by removing parking from one side to provide empty supersized bike lanes will encourage higher speeds. The sensible alternative is conventional bike lanes with parking on both sides. This is the same proven design used widely throughout the city, throughout the region and the province, and specifically on the two streets that connect with West Heights, East Forest Trail and West Forest Trail. The design is familiar to drivers and cyclists and provides an excellent level of comfort and safety. Most importantly, it balances the needs and safety of everyone. The staff refers to their choice as a preferred alternative. It's not an alternative at all. No alternatives were ever offered. By contrast, the region's recent information session for improvements to Highland Road provided 5 alternatives, and region staff seemed genuinely interested in hearing comments from the public. You have the opportunity to set things right by voting no to supersized bike lanes. When you vote, please think of the young children, the elderly, the disadvantaged that will need to cross through traffic if staff's preferred alternative is approved. Please choose a sensible alternative that balances the safety and interests of all West Heights Drive users. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for coming in. We have questions for you. Councillor Ioannidis.
Thanks, Mayor Verbeek. Thanks, Doug, for coming in. I guess the one question I have for you is you don't have a problem with seeing conventional bike lanes. So if this matter was to, let's say, be deferred to see an option of that nature, would that be of something that you would support?
Yes, my concern is parking, the safety hazards that are associated with removing parking, as I've outlined. So as long as parking is left alone, much has been said about how little the parking is used on West Heights Drive. That is not the point. The point is that when you need to visit someone, you have to park somewhere. And if you have to park across the street, even if there's no one parked anywhere else, you still have to cross the street. It's not the percentage utilization of the parking that's important. It's the safety and convenience of the parking that is important to me.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Councillor Schneider.
Thank you so much for coming in. What I'm hearing from the delegations tonight is that there is an openness to a compromise. And if it was up to you, what would it look like?
I think I outlined it. Conventional bike lanes, just like East Forest and West Forest.
So preserve parking on both sides?
Parking on both sides.
Conventional bike lanes.
I still hear rumblings from staff that they're talking about painting these refuge islands in the middle of the road. They're going to use paint instead of concrete. But the one they proposed was 4 meters wide. That's wider than a lane of traffic as a refuge. So on the one hand, they're telling us that the traffic is so busy that we have to paint these huge traffic refuge islands, but your visitors can cross through that traffic to get to your home. It doesn't make sense to me. I would like to see a straight line down the middle of the road, straight traffic lanes down the middle of the road, straight cycle lanes down the middle of the road, and parking on both sides. It works everywhere.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. Those are all the questions we had. Our next delegation is Dave Brown. Welcome, Mr. Brown.
Hi, how you doing? Thank you, Mayor and Council. I just wanted to let you know, I'm a resident of West Heights Drive for 35 years, living across from the second Broken Oak. I'm only in favor of converting West Heights to parking lane, bike lane, and travel lane on both sides like West Forest Trail. I cannot support the elimination of parking on one side. The proposal for lessening the risk to cyclists creates a new and worse safety risk. Roughly half the people getting in or out of parked cars will be now forced pedestrians because of the elimination of parking on one side. These forced pedestrians must now cross a busy street. Cycling season for all but the truly dedicated is 6 to 7 months, or 50 to 60% of the year. Cyclists are only at risk during this time. The forced pedestrian will have to deal with a new safety risk a full 12 months of the year. West Heights is not a nice flat street like the map shows. It has hills and curves that create some significant blind spots for pedestrians. On my stretch coming from West Forest Trail, there's a hill that crests just by Westview Drive. By the time you see the headlights over the crest of the hill, you have 8 to 10 seconds to cross. The other direction there has a bend that blocks your view, and you have 6 to 7 seconds. It's almost impossible to cross without jogging once a car comes into view. You often get started across because everything is clear, and by the time you get to the center line, you see a car start, and you start jogging. You have lights at West Forest and Highland, as well as West Heights and Driftwood. Cars are released in a group. Added to this are cars turning from Driftwood and Broken Oak and Highland and other streets. This tends to create a group of cars, typically 4 to 10 cars at a time. Needless to say, the lights are not in sync, so you get a bunch coming from West Forest. Just when you want to cross, another group shows up from Driftwood. Potentially, you now have parents with children and infants that have to jog their kids across the road. Add to this those with mobility challenges, vision problems, pregnancy, and you have a potential for pedestrian being hit. I don't think you want that. When you have a family gathering, such as a shower, Christmas, etc., it's common to have people take 2 or 3 trips to the car, bringing lawn chairs, food, children, gifts, whatever. Now you have multiple trips across a busy road. This situation occurs at various sections of West Heights, not just where I live at Broken Oak. There's other areas where you have blind spots. In the wintertime, during the evening rush hour, the setting sun is directly in line with the West Heights Hill. I've been up that hill many times. I go up the hill like this. That's by McGarry. The hill's grade then faces you upward, so the sun hits you right in the middle of the windshield. So it's totally impossible to see. Pedestrians or almost anything. You're going up like this completely at about 4:30, 5 o'clock during the wintertime. After a sudden snowfall or freezing rain, West Heights Hill becomes a skating rink until the Sanders arrive. I have a friend that lives at the bottom of the hill, and Sunday morning at church, he tells me of all of the cars that went into onto the curb or into the snow pile, and most of these are not reported. Do you want to mix a pedestrian into this group? I've ridden a bike on both West Heights and West Forest. And West Heights, you currently have to drive in an active driving lane while avoiding broken curbing, sewer grates, and road debris. On West Forest, you can drive in a bike lane, which admittedly is not segregated. However, there are always long stretches where no one is in that parking lane, and you're free to drive in that lane for further protection and comfort. Good example tonight, 3:30 this afternoon, I took a walk down to West Heights School and walked back. There wasn't a single car parked on the road, on that section of road from West Heights to my house. Coming in today at 6:15, there's 19 cars from my house all the way down to Island Road. Bike lanes have been added. This is not perfect, but it's a huge improvement. Bike lanes have been added to many hilly roller roads such as Snyder's Road, Notre Dame Boulevard, or Moultrie Lane, and you've got bike lanes that are 1 to 5 feet wide with drivers that are going 60 to 100 kilometers per hour. It's not the safest for cyclists, but it's better than it was, and you see far more cyclists on a daily basis on these rural roads than you do on West Heights. The new legislation provides significant fines and demerit points for dooring a cyclist or failing to give them meter clearance. It's not perfect, but it's better than it was. Cars parked on most residential streets are parked from 30 minutes to 8 hours or more and generally widely spaced. As a result, I've never ever heard of a dooring or sideswipe on Forest Heights. A cyclist is most likely to get hit by a car turning in front of him. Segregated lanes will not protect cyclists from this. Segregated lanes are better suited to commercial street like King, where you have transient parking that is closely parked for 10 minutes or to 2 hours. Will you be causing problems for 2 lanes wide, and plows take one pass one direction, turn around, come back for a second pass.
Sir,
lanes will be wider on one side than the other, which might need a third pass.
Sir, if I can ask you to start wrapping up, please.
Okay, please vote for a compromise solution like West Forest that gives cyclists a safe ride but does not create forced pedestrians.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Brown. I have a question. Councillor Ioannidis.
I just want to thank David for coming in. He's always providing really good, valuable advice over the years. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Is there any others that
There's
are
still several delegations.
Oh no, but in the queue for questions.
There are not.
Okay, I would like to be able to see the circulation of the petition that was.
We'll get the clerk to pass that around.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. That's all the questions we have for you,
Thank
sir.
you.
Our next delegation is Craig Pollock. Mr. Pollock?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for hearing me this evening. I would be not in favor of this proposal to make the changes to West Heights. I live in the community and drive that road a number of times a day. I have 3 sons. We all bike. I have 2 concerns with this motion or this topic, because the first one would be my concern about the changes and what is driving those changes. You know, when you live in the community, you kind of get a sense of how things work, and if you're driving West Heights, what you find is that right lane is rarely used on both sides for driving, maybe to move around a car that's turning left. By and large, that lane functions as an 8-10 foot bike lane right now. When there are cars parked there, there is still room to move around them. If we want to formalize that with an official bike lane and parking, I'm fine with that. The major reason I want to speak here is because I have a concern about how this whole procedure has unfolded. I attended both of the meetings. The first meeting, we heard presentation from your staff on how this was going to proceed and what was required from the residents in order for this to continue to move forward in terms of voting and support from the community. And what we understood from the numbers that were published, that this was not received after the first meeting, and we were quite surprised it went to a second meeting. I've not spoken with any other residents in the area. I didn't know who would be here or what was going on tonight. I just tracked it down through emailing your staff. At that second meeting, I think we all can testify that it was chaotic. Some of it was because of how that meeting was run, but I think mostly because we were surprised this meeting was being pressed through as pressure from the city that this was going to happen no matter what the residents wanted in that community. And I think that's one of the factors that got that meeting all riled up from the residents that were there. I noted in the conversation regarding traffic calming measures on Glasgow that Councillor Janicki
noted that the immediate residents in where that impacted, the residents that lived on that road, were the ones that supported that traffic calming and were driving that. But that doesn't seem to be the case here in West Heights, where the residents don't seem to be in favor of that traffic calming measures, and yet the city or whoever is driving this forward. One of the things that you realize when you live there is that there certainly is an ebb and flow when it all kind of works out. You can spin the numbers on how what the need is for traffic calming. If we're looking at 41 incidents, as was mentioned already tonight, over a 3-year time period, that's like against 2 million cars a year on that road. That's 6 million cars a year and 41 incidences. Now, I don't know if there's any statistical probability that there would ever not be any incidents, but 41 out of 6 million cars is pretty low. So I'm wondering what is driving this need for anything to be done on West Heights. If it's an outside activist interest for more bike lanes, okay, then let's take that into consideration and see what can be done. But residents point out there are ways to bike around this area already. So my bottom line point is I'm concerned about how this has been pushed forward with, from the city's point of view against the residents' interests. Who is driving this? I don't know. And if there are policies and procedures on how to move this forward, in other words, if there's enough support after the first meeting, as we were told, then it will move forward. That support was not realized, and yet it was still moving forward. That kind of gets some residents upset. And so I think that part of this process needs to be looked at, clarified, and acknowledged from council's point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Any questions? There don't appear to be any questions. Oh, okay. Councillor Hernandez has a question. Sorry.
Sorry. I was just half listening as I was looking through the petition here, but I think the process at those meetings were outlined in detail on the first public meeting, and there would be a public meeting, and then there would be a second public meeting, and then the residents would be surveyed. So there was no intent by staff in any way to drive this issue through. During my campaigns twice, as I've knocked on the doors on West Heights Drive, the overwhelming concern that I heard from residents was speeding on West Heights Drive. So that was one of the issues, and that was even before my time on council. That was one of the issues. So in no time did staff or whatever have they're doing their job, and whether or not these concerns are moved through or not, it doesn't matter to them, because they're doing their job, and they'll move on to the next street, because we do have a big list of houses or streets that do want traffic calming. So I just want to clarify that. I don't think there was any way of this was just being rammed through anyone, because they did go door to door. You're here speaking on behalf of it. So there's been plenty of misinformation that's been out there. And so I just want to clarify that there has been a lot of public discussion with regards to West Heights Drive. In addition, there was signs posted on street intersections. So, I mean, there's no way this was ever being slipped by anybody, okay? I just want to make that clear.
I'm not suggesting slip by. I'm suggesting fait complete, that it was decided before the process even began. We were very clearly told at that first meeting if there was not X number of support, I'm not sure what it was, it wouldn't go to second. And from the numbers of people that were in favor on who responded from that first meeting, it didn't appear the support was there. One more point.
Sure.
And we were told very clearly at that first meeting, because I don't live on West Heights, but I'm just off of it, that on the second, if it goes to the second meeting and so on, it would be people in addition to West Heights in the community that would be allowed to speak to whether these measures went forward, and that didn't seem to be the case. I hadn't heard anything of what was going on, and I emailed the city person to ask where the status was, and he's the one who informed me that a survey had been done on the street and then about this meeting. But it seemed to me that there was more to it at the second meeting, when the individual making the presentation says, "I have news for you, the car is no longer king." And that told me what's driving this has nothing to do with the residents asking for something to happen to West Heights, that there is some ideological force pushing this forward that, I don't know if it's bikes or anti-car or whatever the case is. So I just had questions. Like I haven't spoken to anybody else about this.
Okay, well,
thank you.
I appreciate your comments. There has been several consultations with regards to transportation within our city. We have our master trails and all that stuff. So we do have a cycling advisory committee, and so all these have been discussed. It's not something that's just coming out of the blue. It is a way that people are communicating to us, and they communicate to us on a regular basis that there is a need for bike lanes. But just to clarify one other point you mentioned, so those initial meetings, we're not there to go right away and vote for, okay, residents don't want it, okay, no. Those meetings were the initial gatherings of information, and then follow up with all those other meetings and getting all that data. There wasn't going to be a conclusion out of that meeting, so I just wanted to make sure that's clarified.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I would say that wasn't very clearly conveyed to us.
All right. Yeah. But anyways, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Okay, and our last delegation is Mike Bose. Welcome, Mr. Bose.
Sorry, I was looking for the lift up. Where is the button? Oh, perfect.
There you go.
Feel like I'm in a James Bond movie. The villain comes to the podium. And oh, that's perfect. Thanks. It's fine. This way I don't have to keep bending down. Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. My name is Mike Bose. I'm the Vice Chair of the Kitchener Cycling and Trails Advisory Committee. And I understand you heard 2 weeks ago from our Chair, Peter, who presented our committee's motion in favor of the West Heights Drive traffic calming and bike lanes project. And I just wanted to come here tonight to give a bit more of the, the context surrounding some of the what went into our committee's decision and how we saw staff making their decision-making process in terms of how to what shape West Heights should take, and so the Kitchener Cycling and Trails Advisory Committee, one of the two master plans that we advise on is the Cycling Master Plan, which was approved by Council in 2010, and it outlines over 100 kilometers of bikeways. Many of which will come into place when we rebuild a road, will add bicycle infrastructure, but it also identified a certain number of streets that provided a broad, coherent network that basically ties every neighborhood in the city together. And that priority network is to be built as quickly as the city can afford to do that. And West Heights is one of those roads. Because, well, it's city-owned for one thing, and it connects a whole lot of other streets together in that neighborhood. I noticed in the record the other day there was a letter that said, West Heights is not a shortcut. People have to pass through it. And I think that's part of the reason why it was selected under the master plan. So, city staff approached the committee members some time ago and looking for ideas and advice on West Heights Drive because they had also been approached with requests for traffic calming along that street. And we saw this as a great opportunity for the city to judiciously use its resources for traffic calming and implementing its cycling network at the same time, so you're not redesigning a street twice, but you're able to combine these efforts into one. And so, we think this is a great use of the city's fiscal resources. At the same time, some new standards have come forward from the province, from the Minister of Transportation,
in the form of the Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 18, that give guidance to municipalities how to build cycling infrastructure. And so one of the guidelines there sets a minimum buffer size for distance between parked vehicles and bike lanes. So in the past, we've built bike lanes right up against parking lanes, like on Margaret Avenue, and we've found that it makes cyclists very uncomfortable. And the province, in its guidelines, has recognized that and put that buffered space there as part of the recommendation. And it also recommends, to the extent that space is available, that buffered space be provided on roads with higher speeds between motor vehicle lanes and bike lanes. And so, we worked with city staff to seed some ideas, look at some of the facility type options that were available in the cycling master plan. And I think what we came up with what city staff came forward with was a plan that takes advantage of some of those new facility designs and accommodates parking, driving, cycling, and provides protection to everyone on the road. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Some questions? Councillor Marsh.
Thank you, Mike, for coming in and speaking regarding the bike lanes. I want to ask you, are you familiar with that minimum buffer width offhand, and is it the exact same as what is proposed?
So the recommended buffer width in OTM Book 18 is between parked cars and bicycle lanes is 1 meter, and 1 meter with a 1.8 meter bike lane. Now the minimum is 1.5 meters or 1.5 meter bike lane next to a 0.5 meter buffer. If this, the implication from that is if the space is available, you take that space, and when you're constrained, you move towards the minimum. Mm-hmm. Is my reading of those guidelines. Staff may have more, I guess, educated responses to that. In terms of the buffers with the streets, a lot of it requires, I guess, what you call engineering judgment. So there is a graph that sort of shows which facility types are best when you look at traffic volumes on one axis, speeds on the other, and in this range you put regular bike lanes. On this range, you can share the street, and in this range you try and protect the cyclists from motor vehicles as much as possible. And so I think, based on my reading of Book 18, staff have come up with a recommendation that fits that selection process.
Yeah, and what we're hearing tonight, though, is a call for some compromise mm-hmm. there. And so, should it happen tonight that council decides on a decreased buffer, if possible, and parking on both sides, what would be your perspective?
Well, I guess I'm a bit perplexed as to where the city would find the space for another lane of parking. When you look at the buffered space, that's about 1.5 meters of space. That's half of a travel lane. I did see an early document that, or an early design that staff didn't recommend, that they tried to fit, the minimum buffer, the minimum bike lanes, 2 lanes of traffic, 2 parking lanes. And the problem with that particular design would be that the travel lanes would then be substandard widths, and you'd have difficulty fitting city buses and school buses and fire trucks down that road.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions? If not, Mike, I have one, and notwithstanding, I guess, the response to Councillor Marsh that you gave. I mean, obviously, as you're seeing today, I mean, we're we're hearing from a group of residents, a vast majority that seem to have some concerns. And as someone who's been involved in the cycling and active transportation movement for some time, and now on our committee, is there value in taking some additional time and trying to explore some of these kinds of other solutions in this type of instance? Because I think part of the success of moving sort of the objectives forward means bringing the community along with it.
Yeah. I mean, certainly it would be great if we could come up with a solution everyone would be happy with. I see the particular the recommendation before you as an option. It's predominantly paint. It's not a lot of money. I understand the $120,000 cost we had before was included those islands, and so with that cost out of the way, I'm not sure what the estimate is. I'm hoping to hear that from staff later. But my understanding is that this was part of a number of projects that the city staff have been considering this year under the cycling master plan to sort of maintain that momentum to complete it within the 20-year time frame. We, between this project and another one, we may see a significant portion of this year's momentum deferred till next year because of the construction season. So, I mean, it hurts to see that pushed back a season, but as long as that, it doesn't go away, but it just means we redouble our efforts next year, I think I think that's acceptable.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any further questions. Thank you for coming in. So that's it for the delegations who have registered this evening. So I will now turn it to staff to respond to some of the questions and so on that have been raised this evening, and then I'll take questions of staff, and then I'll come to Councillor Ioannidis as chair of the committee to move the recommendation as it's coming out of committee, and then any other recommendations that might go from there. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Reedman. You can click on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So part of our decision-making process for West Heights was following the new guidelines that the province outlined, which is Ontario Transportation Manual Book 18, which was approved in December 2013, and I have a copy here. And within that, there's a nomograph, which helps engineers choose the appropriate type of cycling facilities for a roadway based on speed and volume on the roadway. So we have 6 locations where we've done speed studies on West Heights Drive, and all of those are in the area between exclusive bike lanes right up to separated buffered facilities and more on the buffered facility end. Part of the winding nature of the street and the opportunity with the parking was to reduce parking on one side of the roadway to provide that extra buffer because the roadway is quite windy. We've witnessed passing on the right, which is an unsafe situation with the current parking lane. The minimum width for a buffer by parked cars should really be 1 meter. We do have half-meter buffers where we can only squeeze them in based on road widths. But following best practice design, having a meter buffer between parked cars and a half meter between a travel lane on a high-speed windy road such as West Heights does meet the current best practice. We are also trying to plan with our cycling infrastructure, really targeting that 60% of the interested but concerned cyclists. Right now we do have cyclists that are riding that are in that enthused and confident, which is about 7% of the population, and the 1% of the strong and fearless. So we did do our parking study on Friday. We were hoping for nice weather, just to give a benchmark for typical days, but there was some rain on Friday. But even with the rain, we had 3 count locations, and one of the locations, which was the highest, we had 88 cyclists through that area in 12 hours. And that's without bike lanes on the street. So there typically is growth in cycling ridership when you add quality bike infrastructure. So cities all over the world, when they've installed appropriate quality infrastructure for the type of roadway design, they've had increases of cyclists, 10%, doubling, and such. What we did note is there's a lot of sidewalk cycling in the area because a lot of people don't feel comfortable biking on the road, so that's part of the impetus behind including cycling lanes on the street, and the cycling master plan was the driver for adding bike infrastructure. Some of the confusion with the study was there was also the traffic calming process, which does have a voting process, and that's where the refuge islands and the narrowing came into play. But our messaging throughout the process was that some sort of bike infrastructure was being proposed for the street, and that was communicated often and throughout the process. At the other two locations, in total we had 182 cyclists on the street last Friday during that 12 hours. 60% were on the sidewalk and 40.7% were on the road. And we tried to estimate what types of cyclists were using the road. There was about 36 that we estimate were children, 51 were teens, and then 95 were adults using that roadway. The Cycling Master Plan also identifies West Heights as part of the priority network. So that includes a network that extends all the way through downtown from the West Heights, West Forest, East Forest Trail. And East Forest and West Forest Trail were designed before Book 18 and current guidelines. And I also believe that the volumes on that segment of the street are a lot lower. So that helps in our decision-making process. Some other information we shared with council that members in the audience may not be familiar with is we've looked at some of our speed reductions on other areas where we've done road diets or road right sizing. So Block Line Road, we saw approximate 8 km/h speed reduction after the installation of bike lanes. Dune Village Road, we saw a 1.6 kilometer reduction. Strasbourg Road, we saw a 5.2 km/h reduction. Lorraine Avenue, we saw a 0.6 km/h reduction. And East Avenue, we saw a 10.8 km/h reduction. We also saw a reduction in collisions in all those locations, averaging about 3.65 per year. So I'll turn it over to council for any questions that they may have.
Okay. Are there any other questions of staff at this point? Councillor, is this a question of staff or the motion? Okay, go ahead.
Thanks, Justin, for elaborating further with how you detailed the survey. I guess my question is relating to if I'm planning on trying to put forward a motion to defer the item, and I want to ask you and your staff on what time frame would be needed to defer to provide an alternative design.
Through the mayor, we've drafted some cross sections in case the deferral came forward. So we feel we could come up with an option that would provide a half-meter buffer between the bike lane and no buffer between traffic and the bike lane, and keep parking on both sides of the street. So it depends on how council wants to position this. If it was sent back to staff to do the design, we could possibly implement it this year if it didn't have to come back to council if we met those requirements. If it did have to come back to council, we'd likely not put it in this year. It would be deferred until next year.
Okay.
Is that it for your questions?
That's the end of my questions. Thank you.
Okay. I've got 4 other people with questions. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I cycle on West Heights quite a bit, and I'm surprised to hear the numbers you've got. I heard you say 88 cyclists and then 182 cyclists. Do you count the cyclists more than once, or?
Ladies and gentlemen, please.
No, I'm serious. Did you count them from one spot, or did you have several spots? It just doesn't mix with my experience.
Councillor Gazzola, in fairness to staff, I mean, they don't make up numbers, and so I think you're suggesting that
I'm not.
You're suggesting that they're not counting properly or doing their job.
Yes, I am suggesting that from my experience there. Now, I'm not. Is it not fair to ask that question?
I'm not. I would argue, Councillor Gazzola, in all due respect, that you're suggesting that our staff are being less than professional in doing their jobs and are not giving council the truth.
I'm asking, were these counts taken from one location or several locations?
And I believe the answer was they were taken at 3 locations, if I heard correctly.
And then I'm asking, is it, and I think it's a legitimate question, is that one cyclist counted 3 times or once?
I'll ask staff to respond to that.
Through the mayor, the highest point was 88. The other location was 50, and the other location was 44. You can't see all 3 locations, so it isn't a cumulative number on the street as the total, but we did count that many cyclists along the street. But 88 was the highest location at one of the screen lines that we counted.
Is that it for your questions, Councillor Gazzola? Councillor Schneider.
Yes, you mentioned that there were some road diets done on Block Line Road, Strasbourg, and Lorraine Avenue, and there was some speed reduction on that street because of it. Do these roadways have bike lane buffers like we're proposing for West Heights?
Through the mayor, these were designed prior to Book 18. The only one that was more recent was East Avenue, and we were constrained on the total width of that street. So there is a half-meter buffer between the parking bay and the bike lane. There is no buffer between the bike lane and the travel lane, but there is a third the amount of traffic on that street versus West Heights and slower operating speeds on that street. So where possible, we try to provide the appropriate design for the safety of the cyclists and to grow that interested but concerned group of the cycling population. So the other locations don't have buffers, but moving forward, we look at Book 18 for our guidance on designing bike infrastructure to the most appropriate way that the roadway deems.
Okay, thank you very much.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I just wanted clarification on Councillor Ioannidis' question. I think you said that, if you can clarify, that if you were to redo the roadway, that you'd be able to put parking on both sides with the buffer and bike lanes. Could you explain that again, please?
Through the mayor, we would be able to provide the buffer, a half-meter buffer only between parked cars and the bike lane. So 1 meter is ideal, a half meter is the minimum width. There would be no buffer between the travel lane and the bike lane. So there's less protection for cyclists. So this street does merit something with a bit more protection than that, but that design would fit throughout the street. And that would leave 3.1 meters for travel lanes. On streets with buses, ideally of 3.3 meters, because a bus does feel a little bit wider. So that would be a substandard lane width, but you might see some additional reduction in speed with a narrower lane.
Okay, that helps, because I went through and I only came up with an extra 0.3 meters for a buffer. So you would reduce the travel lanes by an additional 0.2, and I assume the parking lanes would stay the same?
The parking lane would be reduced to 2.2 meters, so it would be narrower as well. So it's not an ideal situation, but we do use that design on other streets where we're constrained by the curb edges. Okay.
And sorry, just to get this out of the way now, Mr. Mayor, that would seem, like a reasonable solution to all of the problems. So I'm not sure where Councillor Ioannidis is going with his deferral. And obviously we shouldn't hash it out tonight, and we should have a bit more another look at it. But I just want to be clear that I think that would be something that we should look at that is, I think, a fair compromise.
Okay. Councillor Marsh?
No.
No questions? Okay. I have 2 questions. And I don't think I heard you respond to the one in terms of from the delegations around the adjusted costing once we remove the medians from the proposal. Has that been calculated?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the reduction of the medians would be about $10,000 to $15,000 for the 2, plus those little islands. Per median, and then there's the narrowing, which is concrete. I'd estimate that one at about $35,000 to $40,000. Some places have used bollards as a trial to see if you want to go to the next step with installing concrete median. So that is an option we could do here for the narrowing. We do see benefits of narrowing traffic around the school site to reduce the crossing distance for children.
To use some of those flexible bollards because I've seen that in other cities.
Yeah, other cities have used it as a trial before committing to concrete work, and then you go back and do the concrete work after, as long as there's no issues identified after the installation.
Okay. And there was one other question. Admittedly, I lost it right now, so I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Councillor Ioannidis, if you can bring in the report from committee, and then I guess make your because you need to do that first, and then move your deferral. I'll see if there's a seconder. Before I take it, I will allow everyone to comment, because obviously a deferral motion will take precedence. Councillor Ioannidis.
Okay. Do you want me to say what was previously from the last meeting?
That's what what needs to be moved first and seconded by the committee vice chair.
Okay, it's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Frank Etherington.
But
Somebody else. Councillor Galloway-Sealock, that item number 10, that the pedestrian refuge islands be constructed and designed, et cetera, et cetera. And so I want to put forward.
You want a deferral, or you?
No, I think I'm comfortable with if we could put forward a request for a special counsel next week.
So that's what you're moving,
Yes.
deferral to special counsel?
Yes.
Okay, so staff can do the work in the meantime?
And that way they can provide, alternative design that will permit more parking options on both sides.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Galloway-Sealock. Sorry, okay, yes, Mr. Reedman?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if you're looking for a full redesign of the streets, we'd request a little bit more time. It does take quite a bit of time to do all the lane markings. Like 2 weeks' time would be more ideal, unless you just want to see some typical cross sections and some detail work on the intersections.
I want to do what's more comfortable for you to do to do the job right. So if it's 2 weeks, or if it's 3 weeks, then in 3 weeks.
Yeah, I think our next council meeting would be the 14th. Is that correct? September 14th? Is that reasonable? There's nothing in between, so I guess that has to be.
Because I think the implementation will be a lot easier if we go with an alternative design. We won't have the concrete, et cetera. So I'll let you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, if we bring it back to council on the 17th, we likely won't get it installed this year based on the amount of pre-marking, and the length of the street is 2.7 kilometers, which will take quite a bit of time. So it would likely be installed first thing next year, given the paint needs a certain temperature to dry on the road.
Mr. Carmichael, you wanted to add something?
Yes, thank you. Through you, the mayor, to council. Just want to point out that the staff have a tentative plan that will address, I think, what has been requested here tonight, and that being parking maintained on both sides with bike lanes, with the minimum buffer that Mr. Reedman advised. My question, or what I would advise to council, is what type of public process would you be interested in? Do we need to go back to each and every resident after this, or is what is spoken here in the council chambers enough tonight to?
No,
let
I
you
think
go
I've
for
heard.
direction?
I think I've heard enough through your consultation and consultation here that it appears the majority do wish to have cycling lanes. They just don't want to have that type of buffer. So and to have parking on both sides. So I think if we address those concerns, I'm confident with that decision to move forward.
Thank you.
Okay, so so we have the existing motion as required procedurally on the floor. There's a motion to defer to the meeting of the 14th, which will take precedence, and that's been seconded. I will hold that motion in abeyance in order to allow everyone to make their comments, and then I will deal with the motion to defer. So, Councillor Marsh, you're first for making comments.
Well, I would like to comment that if staff has already come up with an alternative plan that would essentially look the way we want it to, why would we wait 3 weeks and then lose the chance of it happening this year? I don't understand that logic. So I wonder, procedurally, am I able to ask that question?
I am sure. Mr. Carmichael, if you can respond to that.
Yes, thank you. Through you, the mayor, to council. We have a concept plan. So what I would beg for more time on is keeping in mind we have a lot of intersecting roadways along West Heights Drive, and we have to finalize what we're going to do at all those intersections. Keep in mind where we provide a turn lane, we're going to have to remove parking from the intersection. So what I would feel a lot more comfortable with is if we were giving a bit more time to finalize that plan, because it's not just as simple as throwing parking down the side, bike lane, traffic lane. We have to keep in mind the intersecting roadways and how we're going to design at those locations as well.
You want to respond?
No, I think what I want to do is I just want to defer it till next week so they can come up with a plan when they think is most appropriate, if it can be able to move forward next year or this year.
Okay.
So I'd rather leave it into their hands.
Councillor Ioannidis, I think staff indicated that next week's not realistic.
No, they don't have to give me the full preliminary plans. They can come up and say, we know how to move forward, but to have a date where they're comfortable enough to say whether or not they can implement them this year or next year. They don't have to come up with a date today.
Okay, so your deferrals to next week.
Yes.
And what information are you specifically asking to be back for next week?
Well, in order to provide alternative design that permits parking on both sides. So I'm sure they have an idea, but I rather them be able to give us that opinion on next committee meeting, or whatever it is, special council, to give us that advice.
And then potentially come back again on the 14th.
Correct. Does that work for your team?
Mr. Reedman?
Through the mayor, that works. If we do come back on the 14th, it's highly unlikely we'll install it this year. I'm fairly confident at this point in time. We have another project that's planned to go that date that's a little bit easier to implement in terms of simplicity. This is a long road with a high volume of traffic, so there's a lot of coordination that's required for the pre-marking and the painting. So it's highly unlikely that if we do get council approval on the 14th that we would install this year. But we do need a bit of time to do the redesign as well.
Okay. Councillor Yanetsky?
That's fine.
We're going with comments right now?
We're into comments, yes.
Okay. I'm just briefly to the point. The residents who have been here and have spoken, and I think they're quite clear. I'm not prepared to support any deferral, and I think we should act on the vote on this application tonight.
Councillor Schneider.
I just wanted to compliment the delegations that came in tonight. Very informative and showing a willingness for a compromise. A lot of times when there's change suggested, the first reaction is nothing. I don't want anything to change. I admire your desire for a compromise that works for all, for parking, for cycling, and for driving. Thank you.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I just want to. I didn't support this when it was here on August the 10th. I wanted more time to look at it, and I'm glad that I took that approach because I've learned a great deal about it we've had 2 weeks. I just want to say how I prefer to see things that gives us a bit of time in between passing something at committee and giving us an opportunity to ratify it. I'm really concerned with what's happening here. Now, I've said it many times that I do live nearby, and I do cycle on the street, and I don't know what category I come in under other than being an old whatever. And I know that it's. I have never seen that many cyclists or pedestrians on the street. I asked at the August 10th, I asked several delegates the number of cyclists they have seen, and the response was always that there weren't that many. I asked staff after that meeting if there had been any incidents of accidents with cyclists or with pedestrians, and their response was that there was no real record of it. So I'm concerned somewhat with this whole process. We really try to publicize public engagement, but to me seems there was something missing in this process. The fact that they had 2 meetings and then staff went on a door-to-door knock. We don't normally do that, I don't think, after traffic calming meetings. So I'm just, it seems to me that we really need to look at the process. We talk about public engagement, we talk about the importance of our neighborhoods and all that, but it seems to me something was missed in this process. I also felt that $120,000 could be much better used fixing the trail than I believe a lot of people use now, and I think that's something that needs to be looked at. I'm pleased to hear tonight that there seems to be some support or considerable support on behalf of the neighborhood as to going to conventional bicycle lanes with parking. I think that's what there seem to be, and it's a compromise on their part, and they seem to be prepared to do it, to go along those lines. And I think they need to have a little more say on this whole issue than just throwing it wide open. Today I got and I'm sure you all did, it was addressed to me as it was only coming to me from a lady in Wellesley talking about West Heights. I think here we have a representation of the neighborhood, and I think they deserve to have us listen to them. So I'm afraid that 1 week really doesn't give you enough time to really take another look at it. I cycled up there on the weekend, and then last night I was coming back from something. Now it was around 8 o'clock at night. I don't know how meaningful that is, but I drove it this time to see, and it's something I never realized as much as cycling. It is how many streets there are off of West Heights. So, to me, with all of that, as staff have mentioned, I don't know what they can really do in a week, but I'm prepared to support at least a deferral, if not a longer deferral, so that it can be done, in my view, more properly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Singh?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and my apologies, I had to step out to deal with an urgent matter. I didn't get to hear all the delegates, but I was very observant on the emails that were being received, and I'm sure many of you did send to members of council in making your opinions and your concerns known. And as someone who drives that street multiple times a day, I live in the neighborhood, I understand the dynamics of West Heights. It's not an easy road to try to achieve what staff are trying to do in making the roadway more safer for our children, while at the same time alleviate some of the concerns and desires for additional parking that the residents may have that reside on the street. So I agree with Councillor Ioannidis' approach that I think some more time may be a benefit. I compliment staff. They have gone above and beyond in trying to assess the right course and trying to gauge the opinion of the residents, and it's totally okay if the residents have a contrary opinion, and that's why democracy allows you to come here and present your opinion. And I think we're taking the right step, and hopefully the deferral will be approved, giving more time for staff to look at some alternatives that would be a better compromise to the opinions put forward by the residents on West Heights, as well as at the same time of achieving speed calming as well as more safety measures. So I would be supporting the deferral.
Councillor Fernandez.
I think that there's been some very, very good comments and a lot of hard work done by a number of the residents to talk to their neighbours. I'm really pleased to see that staff has come up with some compromises. I think that although the deferral could be a bit of a tight timeline, I think it's important that we understand that staff will make every effort to make those changes. I do appreciate that the citizens have said, when I asked the question, do you support bike lanes, that they said yes. As a regular cyclist, I think it's really important that we continue with that infrastructure. Certainly, I have had a number of doors open on me when I'm cycling, and it's pretty terrifying. I've been able to avoid them, but I know that there's a number of cyclists in our cycling committee who've been doored. So it would be nice to have a larger buffer lane, but I think we are listening to you. We're listening to what you're saying tonight, and I really think that this could be a really good compromise that hopefully will satisfy the majority of people on West Heights, will satisfy and create better cycle lanes for everybody who uses that area.
Councillor Davey. Well, go ahead, Councillor Fernandez.
Just one quick comment with the fact that there will be a reduction in the cost of the work that's being done. I've heard a number of times that the trail in behind the Sandrock Trail could use some additional help, and maybe that money can be used towards that. Thanks.
Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I want to start by saying I had a road diet occur in the ward I represent not very long ago in Lorraine Avenue, and Mr. Klein's comments were bang on. I think the residents will find when there's a reduction to 2 lanes from 4, your street will become quieter. It's really a dramatic improvement. In case anyone's confused, because it was a bit confusing, I think what we're trying to achieve now is to bring back parking on both sides of the street, while still having not only cycling lanes but a small buffer of half a meter on both sides from the vehicles. I think it's really critical here. Been a councillor for nearly 5 years now. There's this sentiment between car drivers and cyclists, and every time there's a conflict, I think they get further apart when I think they need to work together. The two groups need to work together a lot more. So I really hope that the cycling community sees this as, we're not setting a high watermark in the street, but it is progressive. We're setting a buffer here where we have not in the past. They're not standard cycling lanes. We're getting closer towards that goal that we all want to achieve, while in this case still meeting the residents in the community halfway. I think the deferral for a week is entirely appropriate, because even though it looks like it's going to get pushed into next year, I think we should leave the window open in case staff can pull things together to get it done in time for this year. If not, that's fine, but I think it's appropriate that we leave the window open. So again, I really hope that both sides see this as a compromise and a victory and a march towards the sort of progressive streetscape that we all want.
Okay, Councillor Inez, I'll let you have the last word after I make my comments and to make, I guess, whatever your final motion is in terms of the deferral. I'll be honest, I've been somewhat torn on this whole issue. Torn because there's one side of me that fundamentally believes in citizen engagement and being responsive to citizen engagement. There's another side of me, though, that recognizes that as a community, we need to fundamentally change in terms of some of these issues and move towards an environment that recognizes complete streets and recognizes that balance between traditional transportation and some of the things that we're looking to do in terms of active transportation. For me, the discussion today was really about two things. One was about creating safe, walkable, bikeable, connected neighborhoods that are the kind and bringing about the kinds of changes that are necessary to see some of that happen. At the same time, it was also about addressing speeding in our neighborhoods. And I think all of us will tell you that probably as we went door to door last fall, the issue that comes up the most as you go door to door is speeding in neighborhoods. And looking at this issue in a way that addresses some of the new methods to slow people down and improve neighborhood safety. We've made some changes to our policy around how we handle traffic calming. And this is one of the first examples, in terms of looking at that, which means we need to look at things differently, and not using speed bumps, but doing some of the other things that through traffic diet and other things to try to address some of these issues. I think Ms. Edmonds in her presentation spoke well, as did everybody this evening on both sides of the argument. She also spoke about the notion of the 40-kilometer speed zone and what the right length of it is. I'll be honest, that's something that I also think is relevant, because I think we need to be doing more with speed zones, particularly in areas of schools around the city. Fundamentally, I'm going to support the deferral tonight because I think we're moving towards a solution that could be, that while isn't perfect, will find a compromise that works for everyone. In saying that, though, I struggle because if we keep doing things the way we've always done them, the reality is things will never change. But at the same time, it's important that we bring the community along in that journey of change, because otherwise, quite frankly, bringing about that change in other areas will become more and more difficult. But I think all of us around the Horseshoe also need to remind ourselves that while we often speak about some of these, different people around the Horseshoe, including myself, have done it, speak about some of the lofty goals around cycling and so on, we need to make sure that in doing that, we also are remembering that when the time comes to actually deal with these issues. And again, it becomes a balancing act, and I think we're trying to do that, and hopefully that deferral will get us a little bit closer to do that. So, Councillor Ioannidis, I'll now come to you.
Thank you, Mayor Verbanovich. Going through the process of all this, and it's been very enlightening. And first of all, I want to thank all the residents for coming in and voicing their opinion. But at the same time, I also want to thank our transportation staff, because I think they've been nothing but professional and outstanding in their regards. So I think what I've seen is being sort of in between both is I've seen basically a difference in opinion, and that's okay. We can have a difference in opinion, and that's why we're here, and that's why we have this public process. So it's your democracy is in action here. And so with the deferral, I think I'm going to move it to the 14th. I think it just makes more sense to go to the 14th and go with that. And just a little bit of a background too. I mean, as the mayor has echoed some of the comments that I wanted to make too. As myself, I've lived off of West Heights for 36 years, and I drive it daily. My family still lives off of West Heights Drive. So I'm your poster child when it comes to seeing how the neighborhood has been developed over the years and how it's changed. So, I mean, I understand it's difficult to make those decisions, but at the same time, as the mayor had mentioned, there are some difficult choices we have to make, and we sometimes have to make some changes. So I hope this is a balance that will hopefully, please everyone.
Okay, so your deferral motion then is to the 14th. Councillor Galloway-Seelock, you're comfortable with that? And with that, then, I will call the vote on the deferral. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion carries. So we'll be dealing with this issue with the revised report on the 14th of September. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in this evening to share your views on this issue. And the report on the 14th will be, officially available on the Friday before, because it'll be coming straight to council. But if it's available sooner than that, staff will circulate it certainly to council and those of you who have been registered through the process. Okay? Thank you very much. We'll now move on to item F. Ms. McGee. Is Moira McGee here? No? Okay. We'll then move on to item G, the tenders. Any questions on the tenders? Moved by Councillor Galloway-Seelock, seconded by Councillor Marsh. Councillor Fernandez, question on which one?
I just wanted to say that I had checked with Ms. Palmer Novakovic about a number of issues. The one that I still am a little bit concerned about is item number, one more.
Number 4?
No, about the inspections of the fire hydrants, which is number 2.
Okay.
My understanding is that the 44% of the hydrant inspections are done by staff. Michelle said that there is no ability to do 100% of the work. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that, or is it possible for staff to send council a better understanding? Because if I look at the cost for the tender, we're looking at 162,000, which I guess if I was to do my math, the 44% would cover the 129,000. Would that be correct?
Mr. Taggy? Whoops, sorry, hold on.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the challenge we have is, as you heard in the presentation we made earlier, in last 10 years we have added about, actually just over 100 kilometers of new water mains. And what that means is that the hydrants and valves and everything else on those water mains, they require the maintenance which is legislated. So, and the staffing levels have remained stale. So more and more we are relying upon the contractor to fill in the gap. So this is just one example why you see that some of the work is still being done by staff, while any excess work beyond our capacity is being contracted out. I have not done the math, so I really can't answer the second part of your question.
Okay, thank you for that response.
Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I have a question on the first one dealing with the propane tanks.
Go ahead.
It talks about a rack rate or something, and it says that there's been a trade price increase of 145%. Well, how does that work into this?
Ms. Palmer-Novakovic.
So, through you, Mayor Burbanovic, to Council. So, since the previous tender for propane, the rack rate, which is the rate released by the oil companies, has increased by that large of a percentage. What hasn't changed is the amount that they add on to that for the delivery to us.
But I guess I'm questioning with the price of oil and all of that now. We're sitting in here now for the next 5 years, and the rack price seems to be humongous. Is there an explanation for that?
Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Chair, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that the price of natural gas and its derivatives is not correlated to the price of oil. So first of all, we can't apply the cost of the price of propane to the index for oil. And the second, as I understand it, is that this will fluctuate based on the market price of propane. The only amount that is fixed for the duration of this contract is the fixed markup that the vendor supplies, and that was bid competitively.
Okay, that's a little different answer then you're paying market price plus
an overhead.
Plus a fixed overhead.
Correct.
Okay, then that's a different thing. Okay. Sorry.
You have another question?
Yeah, on the next one.
Go ahead, because I'm trying to do them all at once.
It's on the fire hydrant maintenance. We have a budget there for contracting out the thing and the service, and we have a substantial surplus. Now, is there also a budget for what staff do in-house on this? Apparently they do the 44% of these. What is that?
So, Mr. Mayor, through you, we have the budget for the entire program, which is fire hydrant inspection. And as I said earlier, some of that money is used to pay for the in-house cost, and others is contracted out.
I'm confused now. What's the total? Is this an operating cost or a capital cost?
This is, I believe, part of the operating cost.
So what's the total budget, including contracted services and in-house services? What is the total contract.
Mr. Chapman, you want to help us out with that?
Through the chair, Mr. Tiagi was correct. The budget is item B. That's the total budget for hydrant inspections, inclusive of the portion we outsource and the portion conducted by city staff. So that surplus that remains in the account is what's left over to fund the in-house inspections.
Okay, that's not what that's fine. I understand that. That's your total budget then.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I have a question on meter reading. I'm not sure I appreciate why we're not going out for a tender call. It appears that they're agreeing to do it for less than what we've been paying for in the past. Yeah, is that right?
Through the chair, they're agreeing to hold the pricing that's been in place since 2012, which was quite favorable at the time. The reason why we're recommending we extend it is because essentially all staff in the revenue division are fully committed to the implementation of our new billing system. There is absolutely no capacity whatsoever to engage in a tender. And even if we did, to change vendors 4 months before we're changing the billing system would make no sense. We're better to wait a year, get the billing system in, and then go to tender at that point.
Yeah, and I read that, and but I couldn't quite appreciate that. I guess I don't appreciate how much time is involved to follow up the tender process.
And all I would say is that the staff that would do this work are already working nights and weekends on the billing system replacement. So when I say there's no capacity, there is zero capacity.
Okay. All right. The other question I had is, when we go to the new system, there's still meters to be read under the new system?
That's correct. But essentially what we would then do is issue a tender call based on the system requirements and the equipment we have in place at that point in time. But it would save us essentially transitioning a new vendor twice.
Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Singh?
Yes, this is on item. Sorry.
Can you come back to you? Or?
No, I just lost the page. I found
Go
it.
ahead.
This is for road resurfacing for sidewalk infill construction. So my question was on the tender price. Obviously, this will require asphalt as well, of work that would be done. Looking at the oil markets right now with the ever declining prices, I'm just trying to wonder if that's already been adjusted into the price. If it isn't, with the trend seeming that the price is going to remain at this level for a while, if not even decline more, would it be prudent for us to delay to get some savings on what's happening?
Ms. Palmer Novakovich, and then Mr. Tiagi.
Sorry. Through you, Mayor Verbinovic and Council. So the pricing that was submitted as part of the tender submission is firm for the 2015 construction season. It is not firm if we move into the 2016 construction season. The intent of the work and the planned project completion date is to fall within the 2015 construction season.
No, I understand that. What I'm saying is we know typically for a certain length of a roadway how much it's costed us last year when the prices for oil were higher and for asphalt. And if that's come down, is that seen through the tender price? If it isn't, perhaps is it prudent on us to delay and re-tender out a little later on and hoping for a better price for next year? Or later in the year if that's still possible.
Mr. Tiagi can respond, but I think what Ms. Palmer Novakovich was saying is that these are projects that are happening this year already. So, I mean, we're getting kind of to the tail end of timing for tenders. But Mr. Tiagi?
And I'm saying if we can delay it till next year, if it means we can save money. So that's what the question is.
I think, through you, Mr. Mayor, I think it's a good question, and certainly we need to keep an eye on oil prices and the price of the bitumen. Having said that, though, I think given what the construction prices have been in terms of the increase in the price, Even though we may see the drop in the oil prices and the asphalt may be cheaper next year, but it may be more than offset by the cost increase in other parts. So I would not recommend that we delay the tender for this year, because then there's a cost of retendering, and also the issue with respect to, as I said, construction costs in general have been rising. So even if asphalt prices drop a bit, I'm not sure if we'll be saving
Sure.
a lot of money.
Just for the tender reporting process, I don't know how onerous this might be. It may be helpful for projects like this, just a breakout of what's the service cost as opposed to material costs. So it gives us a better understanding of where the monies or costs are going, and when we ask questions like this. But I'm just saying, for you to keep in mind if that additional information, if available, can be provided.
Sorry, just before I go to you, Councillor Fernandez, I just want to get some clarity on this, because I thought Ms. Palmer Novakovic said that these are all projects that are happening in 2015. If I understood your response correctly, Mr. Tyagi, you referenced that some of this is for projects that are actually happening in 2016, which, did I misunderstand that?
No, I'm sorry. I didn't, maybe I didn't explain clearly. I think what I saying was that even if we delay the project to 2016
okay.
and retender, then I'm not sure the price will
Gotcha. Okay, my apologies. I heard that incorrectly. Councillor Fernandez.
Thank you. Sorry, this is another one that I had questions on, and my question was similar to Councillor Singh with the reduction in the oil price. But the other question, and I know that Mr. Tyagi and I spoke about this, that some of these, I would like to have an understanding if there are any of these, so where they're road surfacing and surface asphalt, road rehabilitation, is there anything here that is work that will be done on the underground infrastructure on any of these A, B, C, D, E, and F? And G, well, G, of course, it sounds like there is, but...
If your question is, does any of this work involve underground work? No.
Okay. So then further to that, in our conversation last week, I talked about the fact that maybe some of these kind of projects and that money should be used towards our water mains and our sanitary, and getting and beefing up that pot. And you said it would be challenging to do that if it's coming out of the tax base. This is tax base funding, right?
Most of this is. Some of this may be from development charges, perhaps, but most of it is some tax, but also the funding from the utilities as well.
Okay. Is there any?
For example, if I may just,
sorry,
part of the tender is putting the top course asphalt, where the complete reconstruction took place a couple of years ago. So that portion will be funded by the utilities, because that part of the AIRP program.
Okay, so if there's any brand new work in this tender, is it possible to pull that out and see if we can use some of that funding in our ARIP work, in our water main repairs, to try and help that infrastructure budget a little bit? I'm only talking about resurfacing roads. I'm not talking about full reconstruction.
I really can't answer that question, and the reason I can't answer that question is because I have not seen the condition rating for these streets, so I'm not sure how bad or in what condition they are in. But what I can do is I could look into that and see if there's a need for work to be done this year, or should we perhaps delay some of this and transfer the money to some other works that you're suggesting. At this time, I can't answer because, as I said, I don't really have the information on the condition rating of some of these streets.
Okay, then, Mr. Mayor, I would like to just see if it's possible for us to defer this tender to next council on September 14th, because I think that having a better understanding of the breakout of some of this money that is going to be used, also to Councillor Singh's question. I think that if we could have a little bit better understanding of some of the breakout of materials versus labor, there may be I think there may be an opportunity to use some of this money to help our infrastructure deficit that we have. So I'd like to put that forward.
Well, just before I do, I'm going to ask staff to comment, but two things. Number one, I guess the comment I'd be looking for is I think our tenders are only good for 30 days, so does that present a problem? And then the second one is, my understanding is this is for projects that have already been approved in the capital budget for this year. So it would require a motion, correct me if I'm wrong, a motion to reconsider these projects if they haven't in fact been approved, because this is simply the tenders to implement that. Can somebody confirm or correct that? Ms. Palmer-Novakovic.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll start, and then I'll defer to Mr. Chapman. The bid acceptance period on the majority of our tenders is 60 days. My caution in deferring the approval of the award would be that the work is scheduled to start immediately upon approval and scheduled just to finish prior to the end of construction season. So to defer it until September 14th would be tight. I would suggest that the better course of action would be to award the tender as it is. We do have the right within the contract to delete items if we so choose to.
Okay, Mr. Chapman.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I would leave the specific procedural advice to our clerk staff. I would say that if you're looking to delete projects from your capital forecast and add new projects in, that likely would be a reconsideration issue. Not awarding a tender is a different question. But you're also correct that Council did consider the accelerated program and the rehabilitation program through the budget. My understanding is that for all of these road rehab projects, they represent the worst of the worst for roads where surface treatment is required, but subsurface work is not required. So it's been through the same engineering assessment that all of the other infrastructure has been through, and it's been determined that the road surface has failed or is failing, but the subsurface works are all right. So again, you're dealing with the worst of the worst here, as you would be through the ARP program as well. Okay. The only other comment I would make further to Ms. Novakovic's comment is that we always run up against concerns with respect to the closure of asphalt plants, and so typically that closure is weather dependent, temperature dependent, and so a deferral of approaching a month could present challenges in terms of completing the work if ultimately the decision is made to proceed in September.
Okay, and I guess I would just ask the clerk for direction. If these were projects that were approved, would I require a motion for reconsideration?
Through you, Mayor Vanvik. As not going forward, the tender would negate the previous approval. You would need reconsideration of that approval.
I would?
Yes.
Okay.
Because it would negate the intent of what was previously approved.
Okay. Councillor Fernandez?
Okay. I mean, I'm still going to, I'm not going to support this tender then, and I'll leave it up to the rest of the council to decide what they want to do.
Okay. Thank you. Any further questions? There don't appear to be, so I will deal with that one first separately. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The balance of the tenders, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, so with that, we'll now go into the committee reports. And the first one is Community and Infrastructures Committee. Councillor Ioannidis. Oh, sorry. Apologies.
It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Kelly Galloway Seelock that the report of the Community Infrastructure Service Committee be adopted. Items through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10's already been dealt with.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, I would like to deal with number 9 separately, and I have one question.
Okay.
If I could.
Go ahead.
No, I'm concerned with the amount of work that could be involved with this. Apparently it's going to take 7 or 8 months to come up with a report on this. That's the time span, but how much time? I just can't quite appreciate why it should take so much time.
Mr. May?
Through you to Councillor Gazzola. Yes, if I recall the staff report correctly, it laid out I think it was 5 clear steps that included 2 rounds of public consultation as well as research into best practices. The reality is that the people that will lead this work, being the management team within the bylaw division, already have received direction from council on quite a few reviews and studies to complete. And so that's the delay, is that it's not as though this is something that can be done as a one-off. They already have a heavy workload and will work this into their work plan.
Okay, and I'm not faulting them. If I can just make a comment, because I'd want to vote on this separately. Okay?
Okay, go ahead.
You know, I just, to me, it's not that big an issue, and I just can't believe that we're spending as much time as we are on the whole thing. So, you know, I'm not prepared to have staff to have to worry about that. I would have. I think there are a few things that need to be done if we want to change the process, but I don't see that it should take that amount of time. So I won't support the recommendation.
Okay. Any further comments or discussion on any items? If not, then I'll deal with item number 9 separately. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The balance of the report, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Finance and Corporate Services Committee, Councillor Davey.
Thank you. It's been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Gazzola that the 4 items on Finance and Corporate Services be adopted.
Okay, there were 2 items deferred. Councillor Davey, do you want to speak to those 2? Go ahead.
Yeah, on those I will move items. It's actually not listed here, but it's in our report. I'll move proposal 1, 5, and 6.
Okay. Sorry, 1 being Councillor Davey.
1, it's listed, if you have your Finance and Corporate Services report, it's on page 4-16, and that is the proposal that would rule questions out of order, leading questions or questions where you put your own, essentially you put your own
right. Okay.
ideas or arguments in the delegations.
Okay. Councillor Gazzola.
Yeah, would like to see each one of these proposals voted on separately with a recorded vote. And I would like to make an amendment on the one that speaks for delegates to allow them the 10 minutes instead of the 7 minutes.
Okay, so I will come back to that one. Let's deal with the balance of the report then, the balance of Finance and Corporate Services, and deal with that. Sorry, Councillor Marsh, sorry. Did you want on item number 4 or the other ones?
Item number 4 contains all of the issues regarding improvements to efficiency of meetings. Is that right?
So I'll come back to you on that one.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Galloway-Seelock on that one as well. Okay, so I'll come back to you. So items 1, 2, 3, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. So the request has been asked to deal with each of these individually. So proposal 1 had to do with the language issue in terms of questions. And so that's been moved and seconded. Councillor Fernandez.
I'm sorry, why are we voting on number 1? Because number 1 was lost on a tie vote.
So you want to bring it back? Okay, so actually procedurally, no, he is able to bring it back at committee. It's not part of the report that's here. So let's come back to that one at the end then if we can, because we'll be dealing with it separately. So I'm going to deal with item 2 which is in the report that was as approved at committee, and that's that the section be amended to require a majority vote to discuss the report listed as a consent item. Councillor Galloway-Seelock on that item? No. Councillor Marsh on that item? No. Any discussion on that item? All those in favor? Oh, recorded vote. Yes, has been asked. Okay. So recorded vote on proposal 2. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Proposal 3, which from the committee report, thanks for putting that up, is unanimous consent to suspend the rules. Anybody want to speak to that? No. So recorded vote on proposal 3. You want to speak to that? Go ahead, Councillor Fernandez.
I mean, today I asked for us to suspend the rules regarding our discussion on our infrastructure, and we ended up having to go around twice, and many times, you allowed us to have an extra minute or two. Had we been able to have, just be able to go through, suspend those rules and have 10 minutes, I think we would have been done much quicker, and we would have had that continuity with our questions and answers with Mr. Tiegi and our other staff representatives.
Okay, thank you. Just for clarification, you did not ask for you did not make a motion to suspend the rules. Or ask that there be, and there wasn't obviously a seconder for that because there wasn't a motion. You asked if I as chair would make that change, and I indicated I wasn't prepared to because I believed that we needed to be consistent with our practice, which is to allow everyone the opportunity to ask questions, and I was liberal with those times. So with that, vote on item number 3. Around suspending the rules. All those in favor? Opposed? That too is carried. We'll now go to item number 4, and this is with respect to members of council people addressing council with respect to a new issue and filling out a delegation form and so on. Somebody want to speak to this? Nobody? Councillor Marsh, go ahead.
Yeah, you know what? I just want to speak to the portion of that proposal that talks about a delegate needing to provide information outlined about what they're going to speak to the second time ahead of the meeting. I mean, we saw an example tonight where we had a delegate come back on the same issue, and it's possible that he didn't know exactly what he wanted to say until he had heard more of the discussion. I'm referring, of course, to Doug?
Not Mr. Hook, the delegation from West Heights.
Doug from West Heights. So I'm not going to support this because I think that we need to allow for delegates to be able to decide at the moment, okay, yeah, I have new information to share, and I'm going to come up and speak to it the second time.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, take the vote then. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We'll now move to item number 5, and this is the procedure with respect to administrative inquiries and the suggestion from staff that came in our report would be that council would have to submit those by 9 a.m. on council Mondays. Any discussion? Councillor Galloway, Seelock, is that on this one? No? Councillor Singh?
Thank you. I just want to quickly speak to it, if that's possible.
Yep.
Questions? I had not supported this during the committee meeting, and wasn't intending on supporting the direction or recommendation by staff. I did support allowing for deferral because I wanted to see what staff may have in mind as an alternative. And seeing the report, I'm still not satisfied as the direction that we're moving. I think the question and answer period allows for a very transparent and open process where we can openly show our citizens that if we have a question that may not be on the agenda, it may not be something that's moving the natural business of the corporation, but we can ask that question in an open and transparent manner. And I think that is crucial to our democracy and how we govern in this city. And I think that process, what I've seen, my time on council has served us well. It is not something that I've seen that has dodged us down or delayed the council meetings or bogged us into discussion that it took us away from the agenda items that needed to be discussed or take away from items that needed to be finalized on through council meeting. I just don't like the idea of putting forward in writing questions to staff simply because they're sometimes through discussion, through agenda items that may be on council for discussion, but something additional may come from it, and it may not be as part of the agenda item, but it's prudent to get information on a timely matter that you'd rather be able to get that immediately, and you don't have that opportunity to know beforehand of what those questions may arise, and to preemptively be able to give those questions to staff to be able to respond. As I said, I like the open and transparent process of having our staff accountable to this governance body. So I will not support it, and I like the status quo.
Okay, any other comments? I will speak to it. I will support the recommendation that's before us. In fact, you'll recall that staff suggested that we totally remove this process. I didn't believe that was comfortable in staff's that was not a direction that I thought was personally appropriate. But at the same time, I also believe that it serves both this council and the councillor asking the question, as well as our staff, better to be able to ask the question ahead of time so that people can be prepared. In many instances, have an answer for council that evening, as opposed to simply say, we'll get back to you, and we may not find out about it for several days afterwards, as opposed to getting the information that evening. As we learned, other councils have that deadline as a week or longer. Staff has suggested 9 a.m. that day is something that's workable. And for me, I think it was Councillor Davey last time who indicated why I think this made sense. He said if by 9 a.m. that morning we don't have our questions ready, then perhaps we didn't do what we needed to do over the weekend. And that's I think something for all of us to consider. So I will be supporting it. A recorded vote has been called. All those in favor? All those opposed? That motion fails. We'll now go to item number 6. Councillor Davey. Okay. Councillor Marsh.
Well, I'd like to move that this be deferred to staff to be able to go and procure a trial run, like a timer that we can just borrow and check out before we commit to it. So I'm open to it. I think it's a good idea. In fact, it was my suggestion. But I do think that it'd be good for us to see how it works before we purchase it. And I also would want to vote separately. If we are going to vote on getting it tonight, I would want to vote separately the idea that we have wall clocks on our wall. I'd rather, I am against the idea of having it on the wall, just to have it on the desk.
So so I'm clear, you're supportive of the timer on a trial basis, but you don't want wall clocks?
Correct.
Okay, so you're asking that we deal with those two pieces separately. Okay, Councillor Fernandez.
I just want to make sure I understand what Councillor March is saying that she supports. There's 3 bullet points on the last page. Is it the... No, we're not talking about the last page yet. Are we? We're talking about timers.
Councillor March, if you can turn on your microphone, please. Go ahead.
Allocation of time to... I apologize.
No, we're talking about the issue of
the timers.
A two-sided digital timer and
Sorry,
2 digital wall clocks in the council chamber.
Yeah, I apologize. I was jumping ahead. Which number on that did you say you were supporting? I wasn't understanding what you were saying.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I'm supporting the staff recommendation, but on the last page, the very last little sentence before the last section. So to clarify, the second paragraph, should council view the installation of the proposed 2 wall clocks as being unnecessary, staff have no objection with removing them from proposal 6. So that's what I'm suggesting we go with.
Thank you.
Councillor Hernandez.
Okay, which document are you referring to? The internal memo.
Okay, Councillor Marsh, can you turn yourself on again, please? Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm referring to the internal memo that has 3 pages to it. And on the last page, the second paragraph, I'm referring to staff's recommendation that they're suggesting that, should council view the installation of the proposed 2 wall clocks as being unnecessary, that staff have no objection to with removing them from proposal 6. So I'm taking them up on that offer. Yeah.
Okay, is everyone clear on that? Mr. Chapman?
Through Mr. Mayor, if I understand correctly, you're proposing no action because there is no motion apart from the deferral in front of you tonight. I think all you need to do is take a positive motion to do the trial on the desk clock, and the rest of it will die if there's no motion brought forward this evening.
Okay. You're fine with that, Councillor Davey? Okay, so that's been the revised motion. Okay, so we're clear. We're simply dealing with the trial on the timers. All those recorded vote has been requested. Yes. Trial. And that carries unanimously. We will now then deal with the final item. Sorry, okay, Councillor Davey.
Apologies, I'd also like to deal with, if you're looking at your council document, I'd like to deal with the second last clause as well separately. I'd like to speak to it. That's the 7 minutes.
The which one, sorry?
The delegations having 7 minutes instead of 5.
Right, yeah, that one we're coming to next, and then I'll come back to the other issue. So, Councillor Galloway-Sealock.
Yes, in reviewing and in rethinking my amendment from the committee meeting, I am withdrawing my amendment of 7 minutes. So therefore, it would. I'll let you deal with it as you may.
Okay, so that amendment is actually the ownership of the committee, as that's part of the recommendation that came forward. That item wasn't deferred. So that's part of the recommendation coming forward, and it would take a motion to amend that. If that, I know you've asked for an amendment as well.
I was just trying to.
Well, hold on. The clerk's going to help me on this.
On the page. That's
okay.
Through Mayor Vrbanovic, all you need to do is take a vote on the item, If the clause here loses, we revert back to the 5 minutes that are currently within the procedural bylaw.
Okay, and then if I take, I could take Councillor Gazzola's amendment first. If people supported the amendment, then that would become the new time frame. If they don't support the amendment of 10 minutes, then we would vote on the existing motion at either 5 or 7. Well, at 7, and if that fails, then it would stay at 5. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. So.
Can I just speak?
Yeah, you can speak to it. Go ahead.
Just quickly, just in rethinking, what's going on and looking at some of the logistics that have been outlined by staff, and in realization from chairing many meetings, we typically end up giving delegations a little bit longer. That was some of my rationale for the 7 minutes. I don't see us not being able to still give that little bit of leeway to delegations when they have a little bit more to say. And that, while it's 5 minutes, they may be allowed to go a little bit over. And so I don't think we need to change the rules. So I'll support the 5-minute delegation.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Gazzola, you asked to make an amendment.
Yes, I would like to make an amendment that delegates be allowed 10 minutes.
Okay.
If I could
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Fernandez. Okay. Go ahead, Councillor Gazzola.
If I could just speak to it, I would really like to see council support that amendment. I have had a whole list of things here with all of the other issues, and I've kept quiet in the hopes that council will support this 10 minutes. We constantly run in, and we saw it again tonight, where the buzzer goes or the mic stops working, and and when we want something, we always throw in what other municipalities do. Well, in this case, the region of Waterloo allows 10 minutes. Why don't we throw that in as a comparison on this discussion? I really feel if we really want to be transparent and make it something that that doesn't come under the hands of the chair, that people have the 10 minutes. I think it's clear up front. I think in most cases people will be done. So I think it just makes it a little easier for people, often many of whom are not used to public speaking and are nervous and would enjoy a couple extra minutes. So I would urge council to err on the side of giving people a little more time. If it doesn't work, it can always be changed later on.
Okay, a couple other speakers, but I just want to clarify one thing that you said, Councillor Gazzola. While yes, the chair has some discretion in terms of giving people additional time, it's actually also in the hands of committee or council. In our procedural bylaw right now, committee or council can move additional time for any delegation, and that is a tool that has historically been used in the past as council has seen fit. So I just want that clarified. It does. Yep. Councillor Davey.
Thank you. I wanted to speak to this as well. I would remind council in the report that we received, although delegations are permitted 5 minutes, once you figure the questions in there, the actual time the delegation has been speaking on average, I believe, I was actually looking for it, but I think it was 14 minutes. You have to extrapolate that too. I mean, if we're adding an extra 5 minutes now, we're already if we get 4 delegations at a council session, we're already at roughly an hour on average. If you add another 5 minutes for each of those, our meetings begin to get less efficient. As mentioned already, chairs already have discretion to let people speak for a bit longer, and I think we almost always do. And since delegations are averaging almost 14 minutes apiece anyway, once questions get in, there's not really much of a time limit other than the time limit on councillors for a delegation to be up there. We can have a delegation up there for quite a long period of time if members of council have questions. So I too will be supporting the 5 minutes.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, thank you. Since I've had the privilege to chair a meeting, I've never stopped anyone from having their say. that was prudent to the discussion at hand. And I've observed the same from other chairs as well as this council as a whole, of allowing those that wanted to say their piece to be able to have that opportunity to do so. And I think the current status of 5 minutes has served us well. And at the same time, we have an opportunity to allow the delegate more time if they have still additional matters to present to us. But the biggest reason why I'm a little reluctant to not support increase in time, not because I don't want people to have a longer time to be able to present whatever it concerns them, because I think that's fundamentally the most important thing that I value at the local government, that anyone off the street can come and present themselves in front of those that they have elected to represent them and have their piece and have their say. It's because sometimes when additional time is allowed, there's typically a repetition of the same point. And I think 5 minutes is sufficient time for someone to get their succinct point across. And again, as I said, I've observed this council committees to allow delegates more time when there's still additional information to be relayed. And the other aspect is, like tonight, when we had a lot of people presenting, or other nights when you have a lot of delegations coming before us, problem is when you allow a long time for everyone at hand, it draws out the meeting where individuals that had something to say that was important because they wanted to express their concerns, they end up leaving out of frustration. So we have to be cognizant of that fact as well. So because of that, I will support the 5 minutes. That's currently status.
Any other comments? Councillor Fernandez.
Are we not voting on the 7-minute one first?
No, we're voting on the 10-minute amendment. Okay. Any other comments? Okay, I'll just briefly make mine. I will not support the amendment and will also not be supporting the motion that's before us for the kinds of reasons that Councillor Galloway-Seelock indicated. Fundamentally, if you compare us to the vast majorities of municipalities, we actually have much more access to council and provide opportunities for people to speak at council than the vast majority of others that were surveyed by our city clerk's department. Yes, in the instance of committees, there is a difference when it comes to regional committees. But in my time on council, any time where it has been necessary to extend someone, I've seen that happen, and I can't see why that wouldn't continue to happen in the future. Just if you look at tonight as an example, if we gave 10 minutes to the delegations on the one issue, we would now already be past 11 and would have required a vote of council to go past 11 o'clock. So with that, I will call a vote on the 10 minutes amendment. So if you support 10 minutes, you vote yes, and if you don't, you vote no. All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion does not carry. And now we'll go to the original motion, which is 7 minutes. And Councillor Galloway-Seelock has suggested that she's removing that, but we have to vote on it. So if you want to support 7 minutes, you vote yes. If you want to leave the status quo, you vote no. All those in favor? All those opposed? And the motion does not carry, so we'll be staying with 5 minutes for delegations. Proposal number 1, thank you for reminding me of that. So proposal number 1 was with respect to lines of questioning, and that was lost on a tie vote last time. So you're moving it, Councillor Davies. Is there a seconder? Councillor Ioannidis, any discussion? Councillor Fernandez. Go ahead.
I'm trying to formulate my question. It was defeated in a tie, and so does that not mean that we need a reconsideration?
No, because going from committee to council, a motion,
It's not.
so if something does not carry at committee, it does not show up on the committee report, and therefore it's not automatically voted on. However, it doesn't require motion for reconsideration if it's dealt with at the immediate council meeting after the committee meeting where it was dealt with.
Okay, thank you for that. I watched the video of this whole meeting, and my comments were pretty stern, and I look again to saying, how is it that we go from trying to be open and transparent and you know, we saw how wonderful it worked tonight. We let people come and we talked to them. We didn't we weren't having to wonder if we should ask our questions, do you agree, or what do you say, or, you know, points of clarification were allowed. It was a great open and transparent process, and yes, maybe it took a little bit longer, but you know what, in the end I think we had a gallery full of people who felt that they were heard, that they were asked succinct questions, they were asked good questions, and they didn't feel that they had been controlled in any way, or that council was not controlled in any way. I think we really had a great example of why we should not support this proposal. I think that we worked with our staff, we worked within each other, and we worked with our community. And I strongly suggest to council that we do not support this proposal.
Any other comments? Okay. So we'll vote on it. All those in favor? All those opposed? That's carried. So that completes Finance and Corporate Services, Planning and Strategic Initiatives. Councillor Singh. Go ahead.
Thank you. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Galloway-Sealock that the items presented under Planning and Strategic Initiatives Committee, item from 1 to 3, be moved, but we do have a deferral on item 1 for the strategy priority for number 5. I don't know if staff need to speak to that, or...
Mr. Wilmer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, as a reminder to Council, there is a memo sent by Laurie Major dated August 18th, and it answers the questions that were asked by committee and speaks to this matter that was referred to. I think the report speaks for itself.
Okay, any comments? Councillor Schneider.
Yes, I'm just wondering, in Strategy 2.1, where we're talking about foster a business environment that stimulates innovation and job creation, helping startup entrepreneurs, can we also put something in there about supporting established businesses to also grow and expand?
I'd like to.
Through the Mayor, I think that is essentially core service already, and so it's definitely part of our economic development strategy, but as core service probably wouldn't be a logical fit in the strategic plan.
Okay. Okay. Any other questions? Comments? Councillor Marsh?
So just to follow up on that comment, Mr. Wilmer, can you help explain what do you mean by if something is already encompassed within core service, does that mean that you don't feel it's necessary to include in the strategic plan? And can you explain that?
Through the Mayor, not necessarily. If there's a change that's being made, either a change in the level of service or a change in direction, then certainly that can be relevant to the strategic plan.
Councillor Singh.
Yeah, no, to Councillor Schneider's point, I think it was a good comment, and I think it needs to be said, even if it doesn't need to be incorporated into the as a strat priority for a business plan. It is something that needs to be mentioned or prioritized as part of our KEDS strategy for KEDS 2.0. So perhaps even if staff can take that comment at hand and ensure that that is a strong component as part of our continuing economic development strategy.
And if I just to that, I mean, I share the concern that I think in sort of adding the word startup, which I know was a desire, I think we've kind of lost out that broader economic development purpose. I'm wondering if something as simple as or similar to adding, including helping startup entrepreneurs establish and grow their business, includes everybody plus startups.
Through the Mayor, I've been reminded that in the report that went to committee 2 weeks ago, item 2.2 does speak to this matter already. It's not in Laurie's update memo because it didn't change, but it reads in part, support the attraction, retention, and development of existing and new industries within the regional economy.
Okay, great. Thank you for reminding us of that. Any other questions or comments? Just very, very quickly, I want to thank staff for all of the work that's been done and thank the community for all of their input into our strategic plan. I mean, this is fundamentally one of the most important things that we as a council will do because it sets the broad strokes and direction for us as a municipality for the coming 4 years. And that coupled with the business plan, which we'll be dealing with at committee next week and in the weeks ahead, as well as our budget, are really the foundational documents upon which the work of this council is built on. And I think the plan that's before us is ambitious, but also achievable, and really helps move us towards the kind of environment where we build the kind of great city that I know all of us around this horseshoe are committed to building. Councillor Marsh?
Sorry, just to add, even though historically the strategic plan hasn't been connected back to core service delivery goals, my understanding is that we are striving towards that going forward, that core services will be connected to the priorities, and so I would like. I'm so impressed by the strategic plan and all the work that's gone into it, and I do hope that going forward that we can consider the strategic plan as something that is a guiding document for core services and special projects. It's just a comment.
Okay. Recorded vote on the strategic plan. Carried unanimously. Oh, sorry, I didn't flip over. Thank you. Sorry? Yes, the remaining items on that report. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Audit Committee report. Thank you. Moved by Councillor Davies, seconded by Councillor Ioannidis. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Okay, we'll now move into unfinished business. We've dealt with that item. We may need a motion in 18 minutes to go past 11, but I'm going to hopefully get us through this. Any new business? Questions and answers? Councillor Fernandez.
Just regarding all of the proposals that passed or failed tonight with regard to efficient meetings. I know that we have this laminated sheet. I expect that there needs to be some changes on that. Okay, all right, just so that we're very clear on all the changes that have been made.
Okay, staff will act on that. Anything else? If not, it's been moved by Councillor Davey, seconded by Councillor Gazzola, that leave be given the mover and seconder to introduce the bylaws listed on the agenda, and that the same be taken as read a first time and stand referred to the Committee of the Whole. But before I take that, are there any late starters, Madam Clerk?
Yes, there are. Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have 2 late starter bylaws, one relating to PSIC clause number 2 concerning Mill Street, and one concerning PSIC item number 3 concerning 215 Highland Road West.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Singh that Council resolve itself into Committee of the Whole. Councillor Singh.
Thank you. It's moved by Mayor Verbenovich that the committee for second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. Can I have a mover for item number 2? Moved by, sorry, yeah, it doesn't matter. One of you, I think. Councillor Fernandez, moved by Councillor Fernandez for sign variance for Pioneer Drive. Any questions? Just raise your hand if you have questions.
Nope.
No? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Moved by Councillor Davey. Item number 3. Any questions?
Councillor Fernandez.
Yeah, I was a little bit puzzled, and maybe staff can clarify for me. We've got a list of 2 people for the Cycling and Trails and 3 people for the Environmental Committee. I do not recollect that we had that many vacancies. So are we to choose here, or what's happening?
Through you, Mr. Chair. In fact, we do have that number of vacancies currently. With respect to, excuse me one second, I'll just find my report here. With respect to the Environmental Committee, we currently have 2 vacancies. We're anticipating there possibly will be a 3rd vacancy. We do have a particular individual at this point in time whose attendance has been a little spotty.
Okay. All right. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't clear in the report that we needed. I attend the meetings, and I know that we've had some spotty attendance. So I'd be happy to move the slate of candidates that the nominating committee has put forward for both of those.
It's already been moved, I think. Councillor Singh,
do we have
hasn't it?
to pick them?
I had a question.
No,
I asked a question, and I.
Oh, okay. So
they can all be moved?
No, yeah, so Councillor Fernandez is moving. Councillor Gazzola has a question.
Well, isn't it premature? You say the 3rd person might not make it?
Can you move your mic closer, please?
Yeah, aren't you being premature? Or has that 3rd person been...
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand where you're coming from, Councillor Gazzola. If you were looking at it strictly from the standpoint of it being premature to replace the individual, perhaps, but the Environmental Committee, we have a range of members that we can have for that particular committee, so this just brings us up to the maximum number anyway.
Without assuming that someone's going to be booted off.
Correct.
Yeah, that's not what you had said. So, and we are 2 members short in Cycling Committee?
Yep.
So this item's been moved by Councillor Davey. Are you okay with that change? The suggestion, I guess, for all of it to be moved, I guess? Just a slate of applicants? Okay, sorry. Just wanted to clarify that.
I thought I moved it, but okay.
No, you moved the first item. It's Councillor Davey on this one. I gave you the first one, though. Okay. Any other questions? No. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries.
I'll move item 4.
Thank you. Moved by Mayor Verbenovich. Any questions? No. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries. Moved by Councillor Gallery-Sealock. There's no motion for information. Thank you. Received. Moved by Councillor Ioannidis.
There is a question, Councillor Fernandez.
Yes, when I was reviewing the report, And it talked about the preparation of community energy investment and the request for proposal. Can you help me understand, Mr. Mayor, why we wouldn't be able to use our new Waterloo Regional Economic Development to be able to investigate some of these strategies?
I'll turn to staff to respond to that because they wrote the report. Mr. May.
Through you, Mr. Chair, this is an initiative that is being led by the region. There are very specific experience and expertise required around the issue of energy management that, to my knowledge, is not housed within the new Regional Economic Development Agency.
Okay, and have we, our contribution to this collaborative project is $10,000.
That's correct.
Okay. I know that the Climate Action Climate Action WR has been doing a lot of work around this, and so I'm wondering why we're not engaging them as well. They've done substantive work, and their reports are very detailed.
So through you, Mr. Chair, just to correct, I'm sorry, our contribution is actually $20,000, $10,000 from the Planning Division, the tax base, and $10,000 from Kitchener Utilities. It's my understanding that the region has consulted with a number of interested stakeholders, including folks like Sustainable Waterloo Region. So it would be my belief that they would engage that organization as this work proceeds.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Madam Clerk, are there any other items?
Councillor Gazzola has a question.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Are we on
I didn't
6? Are we on 6?
We are on item 6. Sorry.
Who is Sustainable Waterloo Region? Is that the region of Waterloo? No. Is that another organization?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no. So the Sustainable Waterloo Region is not officially a part of the region of Waterloo. It's I believe it's a not-for-profit, but it's a community organization.
So on this project, the province has thrown in $90,000, which leaves $90,000. Who's getting a free ride here if Kitchener has to put in $20,000?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I don't have the answer to that question. I'm not aware of anybody getting a free ride.
Well, there's 6 and 5 is 11, divided into 90,000.
Through you, Mr. Chair, city staff believe that an investment of $20,000 in order to leverage $180,000 is a good value, especially given the work that's being done, and so we have no problem recommending that expenditure to City Council.
So you don't mind paying for other municipalities?
I think the question has been answered, Councillor Gazzola. If you want to make a comment, you're welcome to do so.
I'm going to ask for a recorded vote, and I will make a comment. We seem to have occasions like this all the time where some of our rural cousins seem to get a free ride, and this one, the whole region's getting a free ride. So, fair is fair. Recorded vote.
All right, well, recorded vote has been called. There are no questions or comments. Please vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's opposed by Councillor Gazzola.
Move that the committee rise and report.
Just wanted to ask if there are any late starters. No? Okay. Moved by Mayor Vivanovich. All those in favor? Opposed? That carries.
It's been moved by Councillor Singh and seconded by Councillor Schneider that the proceedings in the recorded pecuniary interest and conflicts taken in the meeting of the Committee of the Whole held this date as attached hereto and forming part of these minutes be and the same are hereby adopted and confirmed. All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. It's been moved by Councillor Davies, seconded by Councillor Gazzola, that the bylaws listed on the agenda for third reading be taken as read a third time, be finally passed and numbered serially by the clerk. All in favor? Opposed, that's carried, and it's been moved by Councillor Marsh, seconded by Councillor Galloway-Seelock, that we now adjourn. All in favor? Opposed, that's carried, and let the minutes show that we've ended at 10:54.